Chapter 362. Ji Tianqing had been waiting for this day for too long. A few months ago, before he entered the Sky Pillar sect, the Burial of Heaven told him that he had to obtain the Heavenly Star Pearl if he wanted to break through the shackles of his innate talent. For this reason, he went through hardships and dangers and investigated from many places. He finally found the result and concluded that the Heavenly Star Pearl was in this ancient tomb. In the end, he was not strong enough and could only decipher 3 formations. Fortunately, he had Yun Yao's help. Under her teachings and guidance, he was able to decipher the last 2 formations. The process was really full of ups and downs and dangerous twists and turns. Ji Tianqing looked at the Heaven Origin Grand Formation that was dimly lit and wide open. He could not help but sigh emotionally. Although Yun Yao was just like him, exhausted and physically weak, she knew that she had to understand. But she understood the urgency of the matter, and now was not the time to relax. Tianqing, the ancient tomb's guardian formation, is finally open. Let's go in quickly. Ji Tianqing nodded and hurriedly stood up and walked side by side with her towards the ancient tomb. The 2 of them arrived at the edge of the ancient tomb and stepped onto the cold black stone path. Swoosh! In the empty air, 2 mysterious white lights flashed and disappeared immediately. The 2 of them did not feel anything unusual. They walked carefully on the ancient black stone path and walked towards the huge stone tablet at the end of the path. At this moment, Chu Huaishan rushed over and said with a worried face, "Tianqing, Yun Yao, wait a moment. You've exhausted too much energy earlier and are very weak. If there's any danger in the ancient tomb, I'm afraid something will happen. I'll go in with you and protect you if anything happens." Chu Huaishan stepped onto the black stone path as he spoke and was about to follow Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. However, at this moment, a mysterious white light flashed in the dark sky with a swoosh. With a muffled bang, Chu Huaishan was sent flying by the mysterious white light. Even though he was at the 7th level of the Origin Core stage or above, he was still sent flying by the mysterious white light and spat out a mouthful of blood before crashing into the plaza 100 meters away. Everyone was stunned when they saw this, and they all revealed worried and puzzled expressions. What's going on? Why was Elder Chu sent flying? Hasn't the Grand Tianyuan formation been broken? Why is it able to send people flying? Just now, Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing were fine when they went in, but Elder Chu was sent flying when he went in. There's something strange about this formation. The deacons discussed among themselves in bewilderment. They hurried over to Chu Huaishan and helped him up from the ground to check on his injuries. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao also stopped and turned to look at Chu Huaishan. Their eyes were filled with worry and concern. Seeing that Chu Huaishan was only slightly injured, the 2 of them heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. He immediately guessed the reason. He explained to Chu Huaishan and the other deacons, "Elder Chu deacons, I know what's going on. The design of this Grand Tianyuan formation is very mysterious. We can't completely break it. We can only temporarily close it for a few days, but the power of the formation is still there. Yun Yao and I broke the formation by ourselves, so we can enter without any problems. Those who didn't participate in breaking the formation can't enter the formation." Hearing his explanation, everyone's expression changed. They started to whisper to each other. "No way! This Grand Tianyuan formation is so powerful? It can still maintain its original power after being broken? The formation can recognize people? Only those who participated in breaking the formation can enter. Those who didn't participate will be sent flying. Isn't this too amazing? Today is an eye-opener for me. I've seen the wonders of the top Grand Tianyuan formation. I have no regrets in life." Although Elder Chu and the other deacons found it unbelievable, they all nodded to show that they understood. They wouldn't act rashly again. They were all guarding the entrance of the formation. Watching Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao enter the ancient tomb, they prayed silently for them. Please don't let anything happen to them. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stepped on the 5-meter-wide ancient stone path and walked toward the stone tablet at the end. This wide black stone path was paved with many 5-meter-long, 10-kilogram black boulders. It exuded a solemn aura. There were 18 steps at the end of the stone path. The 2 of them walked up the steps and came to a high platform with a radius of 100 meters. At the center of this high platform stood a black stone tablet that was 1,000 meters tall, towering between heaven and earth. Such a huge stone tablet was rarely seen in the world. Moreover, the edges of the stone tablet were very neat, as if it had been cut in half by a sharp sword. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao couldn't imagine what kind of skills the powerhouse, who built the ancient tomb, had to be able to set up such a huge stone tablet here. The stone tablet exuded a desolate and solemn aura. The mottled lines on its surface showed the traces of thousands of years of wind and frost. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked up at the stone tablet and saw a row of big words engraved on it. Every stroke of the words was 3 fingers deep into the stone. The strokes were as sharp as a sword, revealing a peerless sword intent that was as cold and arrogant as a sword. There was an ancient saying that the words reflected the person. From the words written by a person, one could see the person's nature, temperament, and breadth of mind. Ji Tianqing was able to sense from the words on the stone tablet that the person who inscribed these words was surely a peerless expert that looked down upon all living beings, and the person's disposition was cold, arrogant, and fierce. At this time, Yun Yao observed for a moment and recognized the 6 big words on the stone tablet. She couldn't help but murmur to herself, "The tomb of Master Kenshin." Her face suddenly changed. Her eyes were full of doubt and shock. The tomb of Kenshin? How could this ancient tomb at the foot of Dragon Mountain be the tomb of Kenshin? Ji Tianqing looked at her calmly and asked, "Eldest senior sister, you recognize the words on this tablet? You've even heard of Kenshin?" Yun Yao looked at him deeply. Seeing his calm expression, it was obvious that he already knew the secret of this ancient tomb. She vaguely guessed something and nodded. The name of Kenshin is known to all the ancient forces and powerhouses of the Tianqian continent. In the era 1,000 years ago, Kenshin was the most outstanding and dazzling of all the powerhouses in the world. Even the imperial court of Middle State 1,000 years ago had to be courteous to Kenshin. They even had to ask him for help. How could such a godlike powerhouse be buried here? Ji Tianqing listened silently. Seeing that she recognized the words from 1,000 years ago and knew the legends of Kenshin, he analyzed some things in his heart. Eldest senior sister is the #1 genius of the Tianqian region, the head disciple of our sect, but no one has ever mentioned her family or background. It's like she appeared out of thin air. I've guessed before that eldest senior sister's background is not simple. Now it seems that I've guessed right. She actually knows the legends from 1,000 years ago. She even knows the relationship between Kenshin and the imperial court of Middle State. It's very likely that she was born in an ancient and mysterious family. Of course, these were only his guesses. He couldn't come to a conclusion yet. Chapter 363. Yun Yao stared at the small characters at the bottom left of the tombstone and studied them carefully. After a while, she recognized the ancient characters and murmured in a low voice, "Established by the unfilial disciple, Emperor Yi." From the looks of it, this ancient tombstone was erected by Emperor Yi for his master Kenshin. The entire tomb was probably built by Emperor Yi as well. She frowned slightly and pondered for a moment. The doubt in her eyes deepened. "Junior brother Tianqing, this tomb is a little strange. There's something wrong with it." Ji Tianqing stared at her and said calmly, "Please enlighten me, eldest senior sister." Yun Yao glanced at him with a strange expression and said in a playful tone, "Tianqing, you should know more about this tomb and Kenshin than I do, right?" Ji Tianqing's expression changed slightly, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. He quickly shook his head and denied, "Eldest senior sister, I really don't know anything about the past and legends from 1,000 years ago." "Humph. Tianqing, you're not being honest." Yun Yao rolled her beautiful eyes and glared at him with slight anger. Ji Tianqing was stunned when he saw her coquettish look and expression. His heart skipped a beat. He had never thought that the fairy who had always been cold, aloof, and otherworldly would actually act like an ordinary girl and show such an intimate and natural side in front of him. No matter how steady his temperament was, it was difficult for him to remain calm at this moment. After all, with his intelligence, how could he not understand what this meant? When he came back to his senses, Ji Tianqing nodded at her and revealed an embarrassed smile. He explained, "All right, eldest senior sister, your eyes are as sharp as torches. I really can't hide it from you. I admit that ever since I discovered the Dragon Mountain tomb, I've been studying the tomb's formation and investigating Kenshin's legends and deeds. I've been looking for Kenshin's relics. That thing is very important to me. The devil race has also been looking for that thing all this time. That's why I'm so anxious and don't dare to waste time." Hearing his words, Yun Yao's clear eyes revealed a touch of gentleness. She gazed into his eyes and said sincerely, "Tianqing, From the moment you taught me how to break the formation, I knew that you completely trusted me. Thank you. No matter what, I will help you find that thing. You are also one of the people I trust the most." At this moment, the two of them stared into each other's eyes. Their gentle and sincere gazes even contained a hint of hazy emotions. Although the two of them didn't point it out and didn't say a single word, the two of them had a tacit understanding. Everything was understood without words. At that moment, Chu Huaishan's worried voice came from the entrance of the formation. "Tianxing, Yun Yao, are you guys okay? If there is any danger, you must withdraw in time. Don't put yourself in danger." Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were immediately awakened. Yun Yao quickly turned her head away and pretended to continue observing the ancient tombstone. However, Ji Tianxing caught a glimpse of her cute and sparkling earlobes, which were covered with a layer of red. He wanted to laugh in his heart, but he held it in. He quickly waved his hand at Chu Huaishan outside the formation and replied, "Elder Chu, don't worry. We know what to do." At the entrance of the formation, several deacons exchanged glances and were whispering to each other. "Elder Chu, you're not being kind." That's right. They were looking at each other affectionately and were about to embrace each other intimately. If you shout like that, they might hate you. Tianxing and Yun Yao are a match made in heaven. They are the golden boy and jade girl of our sect. We old guys can see that in the entire Tianxin region, only Tianxing is worthy of Yun Yao. This is recognized by everyone. "Elder Chu, don't make trouble." Several deacons were criticizing and mocking Chu Huaishan. His old face was a little embarrassed, and his dark face was flushed red. He turned his head and glared at the deacons. He said angrily, "Do you think I don't know what you're talking about? But what is this place? It's a 1,000-year-old ancient tomb. Tianxing and Yun Yao are standing on someone's tombstone and flirting with each other. Is this appropriate? Besides, the ancient tomb is so dangerous. If they get distracted and something happens to them, how are we going to explain it to the sect leader?" The deacons didn't say anything. They either looked down at the ground as if they were counting ants, or looked up at the sky as if they were looking at the stars. Chu Huaishan glared at them again. Then, he turned his head and looked into the ancient tomb. He continued to stare at Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao, afraid that something would happen to them. At this time, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao walked around the ancient tombstone, but they didn't find any clues. The two of them walked down the high platform and continued to walk into the depths of the ancient tomb. Behind the ancient tombstone was an arched mausoleum. This mausoleum covered an area of a few hundred square meters. It was as huge as a palace. It was upside down on the ground in a semicircle and was made of huge black stones. The two of them walked along the wide stone path towards the mausoleum and whispered to each other. "Eldest senior sister, you said that there is something wrong with this Kenshin tomb. Do you have any evidence?" Ji Tianxing had asked the burial of heaven before. Of course, he knew that this ancient tomb was not a real Kenshin tomb. However, when he saw that Yun Yao also said that there was something wrong with this ancient tomb, he was curious and wanted to ask her about it. Yun Yao explained calmly, "Kenshin was a powerhouse who was above all mortals. He disappeared 1,000 years ago. Legend has it that he left the Tianxian continent and went to a wider world to pursue the peak of martial arts. There are also legends that say that he met with a calamity and died 1,000 years ago. However, no matter what happened to Kenshin, it is impossible for his tomb to appear here. The ancient Star Realm and the Tianxian region are just a small place compared to the vast Tianxian continent." Ji Tianxing listened carefully and nodded. "That's right. Eldest senior sister, what you said makes a lot of sense. By the way, have you heard of Ren Huangyi who built this ancient tomb?" "Ren Huangyi?" Yun Yao frowned slightly and shook her head. "I've never heard of him." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not pursue the matter. "Let's not talk about those legendary figures from 1,000 years ago. Let's first figure out how to enter this mausoleum." He and Yun Yao walked to the ancient tomb and stared at the black mausoleum that was like a palace, carefully examining it. This mausoleum was like a huge black bowl that was upside down. There was no door or passageway. Every black boulder was tightly sealed. There was not a single gap between them. At first glance, the entire mausoleum was a complete piece. Other than the boulder that was broken through, there was no entrance at all. Ji Tianxing frowned and said with a serious expression, "When Ren Huangyi built this Kenshin mausoleum, he did not leave an entrance or passageway. It seems that we have to think of another way." Yun Yao nodded and took out 2 talismans from her spatial ring. Chapter 364. Heaven Origin stage experts who controlled the power of the five elements had the ability to fly and burrow into the ground. They could condense wings with true essence and fly in the sky. They could use earth element true essence to burrow into the depths of the ground as if they were walking on flat ground. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao did not have the strength of Heaven Origin stage, so they could not fly or burrow into the ground. However, the two of them could use earth escape talismans of high-grade profound grade to have the ability to burrow into the ground for a short period of time. When the two of them poured their true essence into the earth escape talisman, the talisman immediately ignited with earthy yellow flames and turned into black ash. Swoosh! A dark yellow true essence light immediately enveloped Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao, condensing into a 3-meter-long sharp shuttle and enveloping the two of them. Tianqing, follow me. Yun Yao used her spiritual sense to warn Ji Tianqing. Then, she took the lead in controlling the dark yellow sharp shuttle and burrowed into the ground. Ji Tianqing also quickly controlled the sharp shuttle and followed her into the depths of the ground. The dark yellow sharp shuttle was condensed from the power of the Earth Escape Talisman. It was called the Earth Escape Shuttle. The Earth Escape Shuttle contained boundless Earth element energy. Any rock or soil that came into contact with the Earth Escape Shuttle would automatically disperse and expand outwards. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao controlled the Earth Escape Shuttle and moved forward underground like fish swimming in water. They did not find it difficult or exhausting. After 100 breaths of time, the two of them had burrowed 100 meters underground. At this time, Yun Yao used her spiritual sense to investigate the situation 50 meters around them. Then, she led Ji Tianqing towards the north. The two of them controlled the Earth Escape Shuttle and slowly passed through the walls of the mausoleum made of huge black rocks. Finally, they entered the interior of the mausoleum. Bang! The two Earth Escape Shuttles dissipated at the same time. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's figures appeared and landed in a pitch-black passage without any light. Ji Tianqing's spiritual sense could only cover a radius of 10 meters. Yun Yao's strength was higher, so her spiritual sense was also more powerful. She could investigate a radius of 50 meters. The two of them quickly saw that the pitch-black tunnel under their feet was one of the tunnels in the mausoleum. The passage was more than 3 meters high and 2 meters wide. The ground and walls were made of black boulders, and the air was stuffy and dry. Tianqing, the air in the tomb hasn't circulated for thousands of years. It's very harmful to the body. Be careful. Yun Yao held her breath and told Ji Tianqing through her holy sense. Ji Tianqing responded and followed behind her, following the passage into the depths of the darkness. The passageway was 100 meters long. The two of them walked more than 100 steps before reaching the end of the passageway. Fortunately, there were no traps or hidden weapons in the passage, so the two of them did not encounter any danger. Ji Tianqing thought to himself, this mausoleum is protected by the grand formation of Tianyuan, so it's extremely safe. There's no need to set up any traps or hidden weapons in the mausoleum. After all, how can a person who can break the grand formation of Tianyuan be stopped by some hidden weapons? Yun Yao walked in front and used her holy sense to cover an area of 50 meters around them. She was focused on investigating the situation. There were 2 forks at the end of the passageway. She stood at the forks and pondered for a moment. Then, she led Ji Tianqing into the right passageway. The two of them continued to move forward along the black passageway. Not long after, they encountered another crossroad and several forks in the road. The inside of the mausoleum was filled with crisscrossing passageways. It was as complicated and difficult to distinguish as a maze. Although there were no traps or hidden weapons in the passageways, the mausoleum formed by the passageways was like a maze. It made people dizzy and unable to distinguish north from south. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao shuttled through the passageways. Every time they walked a certain distance, they would stop and analyze for a while. These passageways contained the effects of an illusory formation. They formed an extremely complicated mausoleum. Relying on his unfathomable attainments in Array Dao, Ji Tianqing analyzed it a few times and gradually found a way to crack it. About 2 hours later, he successfully found the only correct passageway among the hundreds of passageways. He led Yun Yao into a dark and empty hall. This was a hall with a radius of 100 meters. It was pitch black without any light. The air was stuffy and dead silent. The floor of the hall was square and paved with black slabs. For statues of strange beasts stood in the 4 corners of the hall. Each statue of a strange beast was 10 meters tall. The carvings were lifelike and ferocious, revealing a majestic aura. The green tomb guardian divine beast in the eastern corner looked like a spirit deer with antlers. However, its face and mouth were like that of a fierce tiger. The tomb guardian divine beast in the western corner was dark gold. It had the body of a lion, but the head of a human. The tomb guardian beasts at the north and south corners of the walls were a three-headed flood dragon, and the other was a giant, bat-like bird with wings. Ji Tianqing could see that these four strange beast statues were related to ancient myths. They were the legendary tomb guardian divine beasts. They could protect the safety of the mausoleum, adjust the luck of the wind and water, and protect the tomb owner in the next life. The dome of the hall was round, like a huge black disc. Ji Tianqing saw that the layout of the hall was round on top and round on the bottom. He immediately concluded that this should be the main tomb chamber. After all, this kind of layout was in line with the ancient people's understanding of heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing withdrew his gaze from the dome and lowered his head to look at the middle of the hall. His spiritual sense was less than 10 meters away. He took out an egg-sized moonstone from his interspatial ring to illuminate the darkness ahead. With the weak light of the moonstone, he immediately saw a huge stone statue standing in the middle of the hall. Although the light was dim, he could only vaguely see the outline of the statue. However, he still caught a glimpse of it. It was a human statue. It was very majestic and solemn. "Eldest senior sister, let's go and take a look. Be careful." Ji Tianqing held the moonstone in his hand and walked toward the huge statue with Yun Yao. The two of them held their breaths and walked silently to the bottom of the statue. They looked at it closely. They saw that this huge stone statue, which was 10 meters tall, was carved with a tall, handsome, and dignified young man. The statue was carved meticulously and lifelike. The man's facial features and expression could be clearly seen. The young man was wearing a white robe and a golden battle robe that dragged on the ground. His face was handsome and tall. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His aura was extraordinary. He stood proudly above the clouds and looked down at all living beings with cold eyes. His body exuded a fierce and domineering aura. The index and middle fingers of his hands were closed together, and he made a mysterious sword gesture. His left hand pointed to the sky, and his right hand pointed to the ground. He was like a god descending from the ninth heaven. Although he didn't carry a sword, he made a sword gesture with both hands and emitted a terrifying sword intent that covered the sky and tore the sky. It was as if everything in the world was under his control and turned into his divine weapon for him to use. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked up at the statue and deeply felt the terrifying sword intent. They felt a chill all over their bodies, and a strong fear and awe appeared in their hearts. Chapter 365. The huge statue had stood in the dark hall for thousands of years. Although the surface of the statue was covered in a thick layer of dust and looked very dark, it still could not hide the white-robed man's soaring sword intent and domineering aura. Ji Tianqing looked up at the statue and observed it for a moment. Then he said to Yun Yao telepathically, "Eldest senior sister, if I'm not wrong, this should be the Kenshin statue." Yun Yao nodded and said with some emotion, "It's just a statue, but it has such a peerless demeanor and domineering aura. This person should be the Kenshin without a doubt. I wonder what level of martial arts Kenshin reached in his prime? The path of martial arts is long and endless. What kind of world is above heaven's origin?" Her voice was full of longing and fascination. She was full of fantasies and longing for the pinnacle of martial arts. After all, she was not only a cold fairy, but also a proud woman who was determined to pursue the pinnacle of martial arts. Ji Tianqing had the same thought. He had many wild thoughts about the level above heaven's origin. The two of them were silent for a moment. Then Yun Yao said in a serious tone, "Tianqing, we have rashly broken into the Kenshin mausoleum. This is a little rude. We have offended the senior Kenshin." Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, "Kenshin is the sage of our race and the owner of the mausoleum. Let's pay our respects." Thus, the two of them bowed to the statue of the sword god and bowed to show their respect. Just as the two of them bowed, the originally simple and unadorned statue of the sword god suddenly began to shake. As the sword god statue shook more and more violently, the dust that covered the statue all fell down, causing smoke and dust to swirl in the hall. The rock on the surface of the statue cracked, and countless pieces of rock fell down. Kacha! Kacha! With a crisp shattering sound, the entire Kenshin statue quickly crumbled into a pile of rubble. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were both shocked. They immediately retreated 20 meters away and looked at the collapsing statue in confusion. The shaking and collapse of the Kenshin statue caused a huge commotion, shaking the entire hall. For a moment, muffled rumbling sounds echoed in the spacious hall, as if the entire hall was about to collapse. How could this be? We didn't touch the Kenshin statue, nor did we trigger any traps. How did the Kenshin statue suddenly collapse? Tianqing, look at the shoulder of the statue. Yun Yao suddenly noticed a dazzling golden light shining from the shoulder of the crumbling Kenshin statue. Ji Tianqing looked up and saw an even more dazzling golden light after the stone carving on the shoulder of the statue shattered. The originally pitch-black hall was immediately illuminated by the dazzling golden light, reflecting the smoke and dust that filled the air, fluttering in the air like goose feather snowflakes. Ji Tianqing was surprised. He stared at the increasingly dazzling golden light and gradually saw the appearance of the golden light. Eldest senior sister, that golden light seems to be a cloak. Yun Yao also stared at the golden light for a moment. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in her eyes. Could that be the battle robe worn by the Kenshin? As the rocks on the statue continued to collapse and fall, the golden light became more and more dazzling. After 100 breaths, the entire statue collapsed and turned into rubble and dust. At this moment, the dazzling golden light finally began to fade and gradually dimmed. Swoosh! A 2-meter-long dark golden battle robe appeared above the rubble and floated in the air. The appearance of the battle robe was very delicate. Not only was there a pattern of 2 divine dragons soaring in the clouds, but there was also a pattern of a circle of silver stars. A pair of dark golden horns protruded from the shoulders of the battle robe. The knot of the battle robe was also a silver chain of stars. Although the battle robe had been sealed in the statue for thousands of years, it still looked as good as new and as complete as before. The battle robe floated in the air, flashing with a hazy golden light and emitting a majestic and domineering aura. It was like a command flag that commanded the world. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stared at the battle robe and discussed secretly through voice transmission. I didn't expect that the Kenshin statue actually hit a battle robe. It seems that the battle robe was about to break out of the seal and cause the Kenshin statue to collapse. Could this golden battle robe be a relic of the Kenshin? What grade of treasure is this? It's so strange. We didn't do anything. Why did this battle robe appear by itself? Just as the two of them were discussing with confusion, the golden battle robe turned into a golden stream of light and flew over with a swoosh. The golden stream of light was like a lightsaber, heading straight for Ji Tianqing. It was as fast as lightning. Before the stream of light arrived in front of him, he could already feel the extremely sharp sword intent and energy. He instinctively retreated to avoid it. Yun Yao's expression also changed. She hurriedly pulled him to the corner of the wall. Tianqing, get out of the way. However, the golden stream of light was too fast. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao couldn't avoid it at all with their strength. Just as Ji Tianqing turned and ran, the golden stream of light enveloped his body with an unstoppable force. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing was enveloped by the golden stream of light. His body immediately stiffened and froze on the spot. He couldn't move at all. Yun Yao was full of worry and anxiety, but there was nothing she could do. Just as she reached out to pull Ji Tianqing, she was knocked back a few steps by the golden stream of light. Her body was numb and stiff, and she couldn't use any of her strength. Fortunately, the golden stream of light that enveloped Ji Tianqing quickly dissipated. With a swoosh, the golden stream of light instantly disappeared into his body. Then he appeared on the spot unscathed. There was no injury on his body at all. He came to his senses and hurriedly checked his body's condition. He found that he wasn't injured at all. Even the circulation of his true essence was unimpeded. It was as if nothing had happened just now. What's going on? It's too strange. Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered. He hurriedly looked at Yun Yao. Senior sister, are you okay? Are you hurt? Yun Yao stared at him. Her eyes were surging with splendor. She was stunned for a moment before she came to her senses. Junior brother Tianqing. You. Kenshin's battle robe actually recognized you as its master. Yun Yao's eyes were full of excitement. Her pretty face revealed a strong expression of disbelief. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianqing's expression also changed. He hurriedly turned his head to look at his shoulders. Sure enough, the Kenshin battle robe was on him. It fit his body perfectly. He was wearing the Kenshin battle robe. There was a dark golden horn on each of his shoulders. A silver star chain was tied into a dead knot around his neck. As he turned around and twisted his body, the wide dark golden battle robe swayed gently. It flickered with a faint golden light and released a majestic aura. Chapter 366. Ji Tianqing was wearing the Kenshin battle robe and couldn't see his own appearance. Although he was shocked, he didn't feel much. But Yun Yao saw it clearly. Her beautiful eyes stared at him, and her heart surged. In her eyes, Ji Tianqing's current appearance was at least 70% similar to Kenshin. The only difference between him and Kenshin was that he didn't have Kenshin's arrogance and domineering aura. But Yun Yao believed that this was only temporary. Many years later, when Ji Tianqing also grew into a peak powerhouse, he would also have the demeanor and bearing of a powerhouse. Ji Tianqing walked a few steps and shook the Kenshin battle robe on his body. He didn't feel any discomfort. With his experience and knowledge, he couldn't recognize the material and manufacturing method of the battle robe, nor could he tell what grade of treasure it was. This battle robe was extremely heavy and powerful, but it was as light as a feather when he wore it. Seeing that Yun Yao was still staring at him as if she was looking at a perfect work of art, he walked to Yun Yao and asked gently, "Eldest senior sister, what are you looking at?" Yun Yao stretched out her slender hands and straightened his collar. A gentle smile appeared in her eyes as she joked, "Tianqing, you look like Kenshin when you wear this battle robe." No wonder the battle robe appeared and recognized you as its master. I'm afraid you have a deep relationship with Kenshin. Ji Tianqing touched his chin and smiled embarrassedly. "Eldest senior sister, don't joke with me. How can I be compared to Kenshin? I'm probably lucky enough to be recognized by this battle robe. After all, this battle robe is for men. Between the two of us, I'm the only one suitable for it." Yun Yao nodded and continued, "The battle robe has already recognized you as its master. No matter what kind of peerless treasure it is, you can control it now. It's just that you can't use its full power." This battle robe was left behind by Kenshin. It must have extraordinary effects. You can try it out. The battle robe fused into Ji Tianqing's body and fused with his soul. With a thought, he put away the battle robe. With another thought, the battle robe appeared on his body out of thin air. He then activated his true essence and poured it into his battle robe. The battle robe immediately lit up with a dazzling golden light, fluttering in the wind. Crash! As his battle robe fluttered, his feet gradually left the ground, and he actually flew into the air. When he tried to increase the power of his true essence and control the rhythm of his battle robe, he was actually able to fly forward in midair. Seeing this scene, Yun Yao was not surprised at all. She murmured in a gratified tone, "It's really amazing. This should be one of the effects of the Kenshin battle robe." Ji Tianqing circled twice in midair before he suppressed his excitement and landed beside Yun Yao. "Great! The Kenshin battle robe can also carry me in flight. It will be much more convenient for me to travel in the future." This reminded him of Yun Yao's hairpin. It could turn into a pair of wind and fire wings to carry people in flight. Its effect was very mysterious. Yun Yao reminded him a few more times and asked him to try other effects of the battle robe. Ji Tianqing poured his true essence into the battle robe again. With a light flick, the battle robe slashed out a few golden light blades. Bang! 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 With a muffled sound, a few huge gullies were created on the rocky ground, and soil and stones splattered everywhere. He was both excited and satisfied that such a casual attack had such powerful power. He studied it for a while, but he was not strong enough to discover more effects. He could only give up. "By the way, senior sister, I saw a pool behind the statue just now." Yun Yao immediately raised her eyebrows and asked doubtfully, "Pool? When we came in just now, I used my spiritual sense to investigate. There was no pool." "Let's go and take a look," Ji Tianqing said as he led Yun Yao into the depths of the main hall. The two of them had only walked 100 steps when they saw a square black pool on the flat ground. The pool was filled with light green water. It was motionless and had no signs of life. In the middle of the pool, there was a huge grayish-white lotus leaf floating. There was a bowl-sized lotus bud on the lotus leaf. The lotus bud was tightly curled up. It was also grayish-white and faintly exuded a mysterious aura. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood by the pool and looked at it keenly. Yun Yao frowned and asked doubtfully, "That's strange. I didn't find a pool here before. Did it appear after the Kenshin statue collapsed?" Ji Tianqing looked at the four sides of the pool. There were traces of stone slabs moving and rubbing against each other. He nodded and said, "The pool must have opened after the statue collapsed and triggered some mechanism. Senior sister, look at the lotus leaf and the flower bud in the pool. Don't you think it's a little strange?" Yunyao stared at the lotus leaf and the flower bud for a moment and nodded. It's indeed strange. The lotus leaf and the flower bud seem to be carved out of stone. There are no roots below them, but they can float on the water. I'm afraid there's something strange about the clear water in this pool. Ji Tianqing walked to the side of the pool and released his spiritual sense to explore the pool. However, he found that the pool water could block the spiritual sense, and he could not see the situation in the pool at all. He was about to observe the lotus leaf in the pool closely when a golden light suddenly appeared in the pool. The golden light appeared in the depths of the pool and disappeared in a flash. The golden light was refracted by the pool water, but hundreds of golden lights appeared. It was very dazzling. Suddenly, a muffled rumbling sound came from the bottom of the pool. The whole pool trembled slightly. With their previous experience, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao immediately guessed something and retreated away from the pool. Sure enough, a whirlpool suddenly appeared in the pool that was originally motionless. The light blue pool water was swallowed and swept away by the whirlpool. The water level was dropping rapidly. In just 10 breaths, more than half of the pool water was swallowed, and the bottom was about to be seen. The strange thing was that the grayish-white lotus leaf and the flower bud were still floating in the air and did not move at all. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stared at the lotus leaf and the flower bud. They felt more and more strange. Soon, 100 breaths passed. The pool water was completely swallowed up. The pool became a dark and deep pit. No more sounds came out. The lotus leaves and buds floating in midair, however, began to tremble slightly and let out cracking noises. The huge lotus leaf with a radius of 2 meters was broken. It collapsed into countless broken stones and fell into the deep pit. The flower bud also cracked, and countless grayish-white broken stones were scattered. When all the broken stones on the surface of the flower bud were scattered, a fist-sized golden flower bud appeared in front of the two of them. It lit up with dazzling golden light. As the golden light became more and more dazzling, the golden flower bud also bloomed. More than 10 golden petals stretched out gracefully. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were full of expectation. They stared at the golden lotus flower in full bloom. When the golden lotus flower was completely in bloom, the two of them saw a thumb-sized silver bead lying in the stamen. Chapter 367. When the mysterious silver pearl appeared, Ji Tianqing stared at it, unable to move his eyes away. He didn't know why, but his heart actually skipped a few beats. The blood in his body flowed faster, and a strong desire surged from the depths of his soul. There seemed to be a voice in the depths of his heart urging him to approach the mysterious silver pearl. Buzz! Buzz! The blooming golden lotus gently flapped its petals and slowly floated in front of Ji Tianqing. The mysterious silver pearl in the stamen released brilliant starlight and faintly emitted an invisible, majestic aura. He looked at the silver pearl up close and found that it was crystal clear. He could vaguely see a golden drop of water inside the pearl. Although the golden drop of liquid was in the shape of a water droplet, it was as solid and stable as a crystal. Ji Tianqing could clearly feel that the golden drop of water was emitting a majestic aura that called his soul. He was instantly enlightened, and 6 words appeared in his mind. Heavenly astral pearl. Kenshin's blood. At that moment, the blood in his body flowed. His eyes were filled with excitement, and his body trembled slightly. Heavenly astral pearl. It must be the heavenly astral pearl. I've waited for too long. I've finally found you. Ji Tianqing murmured in a low, hoarse voice. His entire body and mind were focused on the mysterious silver pearl, and he completely forgot about everything else. Yun Yao also came back to her senses. She could feel the destructive aura inside the mysterious silver pearl and couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. She saw Ji Tianqing's abnormal expression and his body trembling with excitement, and immediately guessed the reason. It seems that this mysterious pearl is the Kenshin's relic that Tianqing is looking for. It's something very important to him. Kenshin's battle robe took the initiative to recognize him as its master, and the Kenshin's relic also took the initiative to appear. Tianqing, oh Tianqing, what's your relationship with Kenshin? I'm getting closer to you, but why are you becoming more and more mysterious? Why can't I see through you? Yun Yao stared at Ji Tianqing with deep eyes. She stood quietly to the side, not making any sound so as not to disturb him. At this moment, Ji Tianqing slowly stretched out his hands and lifted the heavenly astral pearl from the stamen of the golden lotus. With soft hissing sounds, the perfectly blooming golden lotus instantly collapsed into millions of golden spots of light, scattering and disappearing. The heavenly star bead in Ji Tianqing's palm also seemed to have come alive. It followed the rhythm of his breathing and bloomed with bright starlight. His mind and consciousness were immersed in the heavenly star bead, entering an extremely mysterious state. He seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. His face was serene as he closed his eyes and sat cross-legged on the ground. The heavenly star bead also slowly flew towards his forehead and entered through his glabella. In the next moment, the silver bead shattered and turned into millions of silver light spots. They spread out in his body and flowed to his limbs and bones along with his blood. Swoosh! The vast power of the stars immediately spread throughout his body and merged into every drop of blood, every inch of his meridians, skin, flesh, and bones. His body was also covered in a layer of silver starlight. His figure became hazy and illusory. The silver pearl shattered, and the drop of golden Kenshin blood also lost its restraints and flowed into his heart. Every time his heart beat, the Kenshin blood would release a faint trace of golden bloodline power and merge into his blood. Ji Tianqing's body suddenly glowed with a dazzling golden color. His entire body emitted a holy and domineering aura. The endless power of the stars was rapidly strengthening his physical body. His muscles and bones were twisting and wriggling slowly. They were being refined by the power of the stars until they glowed with silver light. Every time his skin, muscles, and bones wriggled, his physique would transform and strengthen at an incredible speed. At the same time, the Kenshin blood in his heart also gradually released its golden bloodline power and gradually refined his bloodline. All of this was due to the changes in Ji Tianqing's body. He sat on the ground without moving and maintained his cultivation posture. He was as steady as a rock. Even if his body was twisting and all his bones and muscles were being reconstructed, he could not feel any pain or torture. That was because his soul and body had been separated by the heavenly astral pearl and the Kenshin blood. His soul had fallen into a deep sleep and was experiencing a dream that seemed both real and illusory. Yun Yao stood beside him and looked at him with a focused and concerned expression. In the first 4 hours, she was still full of worry, afraid that something would happen to Ji Tianqing. After all, the golden and silver light and changes brought by the mysterious pearl flying into Ji Tianqing's body were too shocking. But after 4 hours, she saw that Ji Tianqing's expression was peaceful and his breathing was very stable. There were no abnormalities. She was finally relieved and sat down 5 steps away from him, silently guarding him. Yun Yao could see that his body was undergoing tremendous changes. His physique and strength were also rapidly increasing. She thought to herself, Tianqing has merged with Kenshin's relic. He will definitely receive great benefits. His martial talent and potential will very likely surpass mine in the future. I hope that his strength will increase by leaps and bounds after this cultivation. She had guessed that Ji Tianqing would very likely reach the heavens in a single step after merging with Kenshin's relic and possess heaven-defying talent. But she did not feel jealous at all. Instead, she felt gratified and happy for him from the bottom of her heart. Deep in her heart, she also wanted to see him grow quickly and become a martial arts expert as soon as possible. Time passed silently in the spacious and dark hall. Unknowingly, a day had passed. Ji Tianqing had already refined 1/10 of the power of the stars in his body. He had also absorbed about 1/10 of the Kenshin blood. His sword embryo, 9 sword veins, and 72 apertures had also silently changed their positions under the transformation of the Kenshin blood, forming the sword palace in his body. The Kenshin blood had helped him complete the cultivation of the 5th level of the sword heart path, allowing him to naturally break through the mystic comprehending realm and reach the primal core realm. From this moment on, he had broken through the shackles of talent and stepped into a whole new realm of martial arts. For other primal core realm experts, the vital essence stored in their dantian would condense into a solid elixir. Ji Tianqing's sword embryo had long been solid. After reaching the primal core realm, it did not change much. Next, after reaching the primal core realm, he would cultivate the 6th level of the sword heart path and open up 18 sword veins in his body. A normal human ancient martial art practitioner only had 9 meridians. It was impossible for them to open up 9 new meridians. However, The power of the stars in Ji Tianqing's body had been constantly helping him to transform the structure of his body and reorganize his meridians and apertures. As time passed, new meridians appeared in his body. The 10th, 11th, 12th. Chapter 368. Time flowed by ceaselessly in the dark and silent audience hall. Ji Tianqing had always been enveloped by the silver starlight, and his entire body was suffused with a faint golden light that emitted a mysterious and majestic aura. His eyes were tightly closed as he slept, allowing the star energy to transform his fleshly body and help him open and temper his sword vein. That drop of golden Kenshin blood slowly dissipated and merged into Ji Tianqing's bloodline. 3 days passed by quickly. Ji Tianqing finally completely merged with that drop of Kenshin blood, and the blood that flowed in his body completed its transformation and successfully merged with the Kenshin bloodline. The star energy was exhausted as well, strengthening his fleshly body to the limit. After his body was reconstructed, it became different from an ordinary human. Not only was his defense, strength, and speed extremely strong, his compatibility with the spirit energy of heaven and earth had reached a nearly perfect level. His speed of absorbing the spirit energy of heaven and earth was at least 5 times faster than before. Now that he meditated and cultivated for a day, the true origin energy he accumulated was comparable to 5 days of accumulation in the past. And the greatest change in his body was that he opened up 3 new meridians, and they were tempered into sword veins by the star energy. An ordinary person only had 9 meridians, but Ji Tianqing possessed 12 meridians. Not only did this cause his true origin to be even more majestic and his strength to become even more formidable, it also allowed him to break through the shackles of the human body, and his natural talent surpassed the limits of the human race. Of course, within these 3 days, his strength and cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and it rose at an unbelievable speed. Presently, his strength had already reached the 3rd level of the origin core stage. After fusing with the heavenly star bead, not only did he surpass the 5th level of the Sword Heart Tao, he even surpassed the 1st and 2nd level of the Origin Core stage and directly jumped to the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. Such a shocking speed of growth caused even him to feel disbelief. An ordinary Origin Core stage expert would need 3 to 5 years to advance a level, whereas he only used 3 days to advance from the 9th level of the Profound Comprehension stage to the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. Such a shocking speed of advancement could simply be called heaven-defying. The heavenly star bead brought him enormous gains, not only reconstructing his fleshly body and fusing with the Kenshin bloodline, it also saved him 10 years of bitter cultivation. Finally, the silver starlight on Ji Tianqing's body dissipated, and the faint golden light on his skin also disappeared. He had already refined the heavenly star bead and fused with the Kenshin bloodline. However, there was still a vast amount of star power hidden in his limbs and bones, subtly strengthening his body. For a long time to come, the Kenshin bloodline would continue to strengthen his bloodline and further enhance his talent. Ji Tianqing left the dreamland and gradually woke up. He opened his eyes. Shwa! At that instant, his eyes that were deep and vast like the stars emanated a fierce bright light, and he emanated a confident and overbearing aura. His body shape and appearance had undergone some subtle changes. Now his figure had become even taller and more valiant. His muscles were smooth, and his body proportions were perfect. Even his face was more handsome than before, and he had the confidence and arrogance of a genius expert. Not far from him, Yun Yao had silently guarded him for 3 days. Seeing him wake up, Yun Yao was completely relieved. Her eyes stared at his face, carefully sizing him up. Yun Yao could clearly feel the changes in him, and she could see that his strength had indeed advanced by leaps and bounds, and he had actually reached the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. Not only that, his figure and appearance had become even more perfect and outstanding, and his temperament had become even more determined, confident, and overbearing. She had only seen such a unique aura on a few experts. Just as Ji Tianqing woke up from his dream and opened his eyes, Ji Tianqing's expression changed. In the vast and boundless starry sky, among the densely packed stars, there was a tiny and weak star that suddenly blossomed with dazzling starlight. The originally silent and dim star suddenly became as dazzling as the 7 stars of the Heavenly Dipper, and it was actually able to compete with the bright moon. At the peak of a mountain in the Tianjian sect, The white-bearded and white-haired Taoist priest was standing at the peak of a palace, holding a silver horsetail whisk in his hand as he calmly looked up at the night sky. His eyes shone brightly as he deeply observed the stars in the sky, and he silently deduced some clues in his mind. At this moment, he saw that in the depths of the bright starry sky, there was a weak and dim star that suddenly lit up with dazzling starlight, and it actually overshadowed the light of the 7 stars of the heavenly dipper. He was instantly filled with shock, and his expression changed drastically as his eyes widened. He stared at the dazzling star in disbelief, and his brows were tightly knitted together. The 5 fingers on his right hand moved rapidly as he quickly deduced the secrets of the heavens. After a long time, when he deduced the result, his expression immediately became furious and ferocious, and his eyes were filled with intense rage. The heavenly star pearl actually appeared. If I'm not wrong, it should be that kid who obtained the heavenly star pearl. Taoist priest Heavenly Secret's emotions became extremely complicated, and he was both shocked and furious. The heavenly star pearl has appeared, and it seems like the time for our Devil clan to revive has arrived. I have to send a message to Lord Devil King as soon as possible. He muttered in his heart before he hurriedly turned around and left. At the same time, in the imperial court hundreds of millions of miles away from the Tianqian region, the sage-like imperial tutor was sitting cross-legged on the star-plucking platform that was tens of thousands of feet tall. He held a golden horsetail whisk in his hand, and his eyes were closed as he silently cultivated, comprehending the myriad of stars and the secrets of the heavens. The star-plucking platform was the closest place to the sky, and it was as if one could reach out and pluck the stars in the sky. Below the platform was a sea of white clouds, and the clouds were churning. The astral wind on the platform was biting cold, and there was even the fire of the 9 heavens stars descending at any time. Martial artists below the heavenly origin realm would not be able to stay on the star-plucking platform for long, and their souls would be blown away by the astral wind or frozen to death. The imperial tutor was only wearing a purple robe, and he had been sitting on the platform engraved with array patterns for a few days, but he was still safe and sound, and did not feel the slightest bit of discomfort. For an expert like him, who had long been above the masses, how could he be hurt by the wind and frost? He was using a secret art of the Xian Dao, observing the stars with the heavenly magic eye, and deducing the mysteries of the Tianqian region. Suddenly, the weak and tiny star in the vast starry sky lit up with dazzling starlight. The starlight covered the brilliance of millions of stars, and it was actually able to compete with the brilliance of the moon. The imperial tutor's expression changed abruptly, and he opened his eyes with a swish. He looked at the starry sky with a sharp gaze, and stared at the dazzling star. There is a faint golden light in the dazzling silver. That star is Kenshin's destined star. The imperial tutor's face was full of shock, and he exclaimed in disbelief, Kenshin's destined star has been silent and dim for thousands of years. Why did it suddenly shine again tonight? Could it be that Kenshin has appeared again? Thinking of this, the imperial tutor lost his composure, and the beard on his chin trembled. Chapter 369. Ji Tianqing had just woken up when he saw Yun Yao next to him. Seeing that she looked a little tired, he said gently, Eldest senior sister, you've been protecting me while I was sleeping and cultivating. Thank you for your hard work. Yun Yao stared at him. Her eyes and emotions were very calm. She said naturally, There's no need to thank me between you and me. Ji Tianqing nodded. There was a gentle smile in his eyes. He asked again, Eldest senior sister, how long have I been sleeping? 3 days. Yun Yao stood up. She used her power to shake off the dust on her white dress. She returned to her fairy-like appearance. Ji Tianqing frowned and said softly, I've been sleeping for 3 days? The 9 cauldrons universe formation can only be temporarily closed for 3.5 days. Eldest senior sister, we only have half a day left. We have to leave as soon as possible. Okay. Yun Yao nodded in agreement. After a pause, she asked again, Tianqing, the ancient tomb is so big. Aren't you going to explore other places? Moreover, this is a Kenshin tomb, and there are Kenshin relics here. Don't you want to know if the Kenshin remains are buried here? Ji Tianqing thought for a while and made up his mind. Then let's set the time limit at 6 hours. When the time is up, we have to leave regardless of whether we find anything or not. Okay, let's get started then. Yun Yao agreed. Then, the two of them left the empty and dark hall and entered a dark passage. They continued to travel through the ancient tomb and explore more places. There were hundreds of passages in the ancient tomb. They were crisscrossed and stacked on top of each other. It was as complicated as a fishing net. However, Ji Tianqing had already understood the mystery of the maze. He could always find the right passage quickly and accurately. In the next 6 hours, he led Yun Yao through the passageway and found a few more side halls and stone rooms. In the smaller side halls, there were only some strange statues, but no useful clues. There were several stone rooms with reliefs and words carved into the walls. They recorded the deeds of Emperor Yi when he was young and received guidance from Kenshin. Other than that, the two of them did not find any other treasures, nor did they find Kenshin's coffin or remains. 6 hours were almost up. Ji Tianqing stopped searching and led Yun Yao through the passage to the edge of the ancient tomb. While the two of them were walking in the tunnel, Yun Yao had also analyzed the results. It seems that this mausoleum of Kenshin that Ren Huangyi built is not a true mausoleum of Kenshin, but a cenotaph. Ji Tianqing had already guessed this, so he nodded and explained. When Ren Huangyi was young, he was fortunate enough to receive guidance from Kenshin, which is why he is so respectful of Kenshin. Although Kenshin only gave him some small guidance, it changed his life and made him a top cultivator in the Tianjin region. Ren Huangyi regarded Kenshin as his teacher. After he learned of Kenshin's death, he built a cenotaph at the foot of Longshan to commemorate and remember Kenshin. After listening to his explanation, Yun Yao finally understood the origin of the ancient tomb on Longshan and understood the whole story. I see. Not long after, the two of them returned to the passage that they had just entered the ancient tomb. Yun Yao took out 2 Earth Escape talismans. The two of them used the power of the talismans to leave the dark passage and return to the surface. Outside the ancient tomb, at the entrance of the Tianyuan Formation, Chu Huaishan and several deacons stared at the dark ancient tomb. Their eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. The deacons were on tenterhooks and discussing in low voices. It's already the 4th day. Why haven't Tianqing and Yun Yao come out yet? Ever since the two of them entered the ancient tomb, there hasn't been any movement inside. Could something have happened? This ancient tomb has a history of thousands of years and is protected by the Tianyuan Formation. It must be extremely dangerous. I'm really worried that Tianqing and Yun Yao can't handle it. Don't say such discouraging words. Let's wait patiently. I believe in Tianqing and Yun Yao. Chu Huaishan's expression was solemn. He was silently considering whether to send a message to the sect leader. Even if he knew that Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing were top geniuses who possessed talent and wisdom that ordinary warriors could not imagine. However, it had been 4 days and Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing still hadn't shown up. There was no news at all. How could he not be anxious? After weighing the pros and cons for a long time, he finally made up his mind. He would wait for 2 more hours at most. If there was still no news from Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao, he would send a message to the sect leader and ask him to make a decision. At this moment, he suddenly saw 2 rays of yellow light shining behind the huge tombstone in the dark ancient tomb. Swoosh! Swoosh! After the 2 rays of yellow light faded, 2 figures in white robes appeared. Although they were far away, the 2 figures were a little hazy. Chu Huaishan couldn't see them clearly. However, he was sure that the 2 figures were Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Great! They're finally out. Chu Huaishan finally heaved a sigh of relief. The heavy burden in his heart was finally lifted. The anxious and worried deacons also showed a relieved expression, and their faces were full of smiles. That's great. They're fine. I wonder if the 2 of them made any discoveries or gains in the tomb. Don't worry about that. It's good that they're out. That's right. If anything happens to them, we won't be able to explain it to the sect leader. The deacons discussed for a while, and their moods relaxed. After a while, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao walked out along the black stone path. They crossed the entrance of the Tianyuan spell formation and returned to Chu Huaishan and the rest. Tianqing, Yun Yao, you're finally out. Chu Huaishan quickly greeted them and said with a relieved expression. Ji Tianqing saluted him and greeted him. Elder Chu, deacons, sorry to keep you waiting. Chu Huaishan and the deacons looked at the 2 of them. They were really relieved when they saw that the 2 of them were unharmed. However, everyone's eyes were focused on Ji Tianqing. They looked at him carefully, and there was a strange look in their eyes. All of them were origin core powerhouses. Naturally, they could see that Ji Tianqing's figure, appearance, and temperament seemed to be different from 4 days ago. When Chu Huaishan used his spiritual sense to check Ji Tianqing's strength, his face was filled with shock, and he let out a cry of disbelief. Tianqing, you've reached the origin core stage? The deacons' bodies trembled, and they were all shocked. They stared at Ji Tianqing with their eyes wide open, as if they were looking at a monster. My God, you've broken through to the origin core stage in just 3 to 4 days? Moreover, you're at the 3rd level of the origin core stage. I've been cultivating for more than 50 years to reach the 3rd level of the origin core stage. That's why I can be a deacon in the sect. Tianqing, you're only 17 years old, and you? Sigh. Tianqing, what great opportunity did you get in the ancient tomb? You actually reached the 3rd level of the origin core stage from the 9th level of the mystic enlightenment stage? This is unbelievable. This is a miracle. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. Yun Yao reached the origin core stage at the age of 19, and is known as the #1 genius in the heavenly stellar region. Tianqing reached the origin core stage at the age of 17. Isn't he an even greater genius? Ha ha ha, the heavens are protecting our sky pillar sect. With these 2 peerless geniuses, Yun Yao and Tianqing, our sect will prosper. Chu Huaishan and the elders were excited. They discussed excitedly and let out waves of exclamations. Everyone compared him to Yun Yao. Yun Yao didn't feel embarrassed. She was happy for him. Ji Tianqing was praised by the deacons, but he wasn't arrogant. His expression was still indifferent. Chapter 370. Ji Tianqing could clearly see that the Tianyuan Grand Formation was changing. It was about to be reactivated. He said to everyone with a serious face, "We've already explored this tomb. It's worthless now. Elder Chu deacons, let's leave this place as soon as possible. The Tianyuan Grand Formation is about to be reactivated. I have a feeling that this Grand Formation is about to self-destruct." Chu Huaishan and the deacons' expressions changed slightly when they heard that. Although they had their doubts, they believed him without a doubt. Therefore, everyone followed Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao out of the Tianyuan Grand Formation. After 100 breaths of time, when everyone passed through the dilapidated square and was about to enter the ancient passage, the Tianyuan Grand Formation was reactivated. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 5-colored light shield within a kilometer radius immediately lit up with a dazzling brilliance and released a powerful aura. The grand formations that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had shut down were reactivated one after another. The 9 Cauldrons Universe Grand Formation was the first to be reactivated, followed by the 8-level Dragon Lock and the Big Dipper 7 Stars Grand Formation. Within a dozen breaths of time, all 5 Grand Formations were reactivated. The Tianyuan Grand Formation became dazzling and powerful again. Immediately after, the Tianyuan Grand Formation began to churn violently as it began to brew. The 5-colored light shield within a kilometer radius started to shake violently. The entire ancient tomb and the ground around it also started to rumble and shake. Along with the cracking sounds, the ground around the ancient tomb cracked open and a huge gully appeared. The dilapidated square also had a huge crack. The stone slabs on the ground started to crumble. Seeing this, Yun Yao's expression changed slightly. She thought to herself, just as Tianqing said, the most profound mechanism and the greatest danger in the ancient tomb is the Tianyuan Grand Formation. Fortunately, we left the ancient tomb in time. If we hadn't come out by now, he and I would have been smashed into pieces and died in the ancient tomb. Chu Huaishan and the deacon's expressions also changed slightly. They looked relieved. Tianqing was right. The Grand Tianyuan Formation was about to self-destruct. Fortunately, we left in time. It's not safe enough here. We have to stay away from here. Once the Tianyuan Grand Formation explodes, the entire Dragon Mountain will be destroyed. Hearing the deacon's words, everyone immediately revealed anxious and worried expressions. If the Tianyuan Grand Formation exploded, the entire Dragon Mountain would be blown up. Not only would they not be able to escape, even the guards, disciples, and handymen who guarded the Dragon Mountain would be buried here. Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to panic. Don't worry, everyone. The design of this Grand Heaven Essence Formation is incomparably wondrous. Even if the formation self-destructs, its power will be contained within the formation and will not spread to other places. As soon as Ji Tianqing finished speaking, the power accumulated in the Tianyuan Grand Array reached its peak. Boom! A deafening sound suddenly burst out, reverberating in the empty and dark depths of the underground. The huge five-colored light shield collapsed instantly, turning into a huge five-colored mushroom cloud. What was strange was that the five-colored flame burst out when the formation self-destructed did not spread out. Instead, it surged toward the inside of the ancient tomb. Just as Ji Tianqing said, the terrifying power that could destroy the world did not rush out of the grand heaven essence formation's range. Suddenly, the dark night sky was illuminated. The area within a radius of a few thousand meters was illuminated. The ground around the ancient tomb trembled crazily from the impact. Numerous cracks appeared on the ground, and dust flew into the air. The ancient, dilapidated square collapsed completely. It collapsed into the ground and turned into a huge pit. The surrounding rock walls were also shaken to the point of incessant tremors. Cracks appeared on the walls as dust and gravel rolled down. Even the entire Dragon Mountain started to shake as if there was a huge earthquake. Many handymen and disciples who did not know what was going on fled in panic. The earth-shattering commotion lasted for a full 15 minutes before it stopped. The dazzling five-colored light faded away. The deafening sound dissipated. The trembling ground also calmed down. The area within a radius of a few thousand meters returned to darkness and peace. The air became heavy and still. Everyone opened their eyes wide and looked at the ancient tomb. They saw that the grand heaven essence formation and the ancient tomb had disappeared. There was nothing left in the area within a radius of 1,000 meters. It had become a pitch-black abyss. Everyone stood in the ancient tunnel and witnessed the process of the formation self-destructing and the ancient tomb disappearing. They were all shocked. After a long time, everyone calmed down. They turned around and walked through the tunnel, leaving the depths of the underground. An hour later, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao returned to the peak of the Dragon Mountain. The two of them stood side by side on the peak of the mountain. They looked at the scenery at the foot of the mountain and felt a little emotional. Ji Tianqing looked at the mountains in the distance and said calmly, "In the past, there was a Kenshin mausoleum deep underground. The Dragon Mountain was affected by the grand heaven essence formation and turned into a treasure land with spirit veins. Now that the ancient tomb has disappeared and the Dragon Mountain has been ruined by the Tianjian sect, I'm afraid that this treasure land with spirit veins will be completely destroyed." Yun Yao raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, "It's okay. Without the Dragon Mountain, the sect will look for other spirit veins. Let's go back and report to Master. He must be waiting anxiously." Then, the two of them left the Dragon Mountain on the spirit crane and rushed back to the Sky Pillar sect. In less than 2 hours, the two of them returned to the Sky Pillar sect. Yun Yao rode the spirit crane and landed on the red firmament peak. The two of them entered the Sky Pillar Palace together and reported to Chu Tianqing. During these 4 days, although Chu Tianqing was busy with the sect's affairs, he was always thinking about Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and worried about them. When he heard the black-robed guard's report and found out that Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing had returned safely, he was finally at ease and heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately walked out of the secret room and quickly entered the Sky Pillar Palace. As soon as he entered the audience hall, he saw Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao standing in the audience hall and waiting quietly. He sized them up for a moment before his gaze descended onto Ji Tianqing. He couldn't help but stop as a bright light flashed in his eyes. "Tianqing, you've actually broken through to the Origin Core stage and even reached the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage." Chu Tianqing revealed a surprised expression and was rather incredulous. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao hurriedly bowed to him. "Greetings, Master." Chu Tianqing raised his hands to indicate that the two of them could dispense with the formalities, and then he hurriedly asked, "Tianqing, quickly tell Master if the two of you broke through the grand formation? Did you obtain some fortuitous encounter?" Ji Tianqing nodded and reported with a calm tone, "Master, disciple and eldest senior sister worked together to break through the grand formation and found a way to enter the ancient tomb, and we noticed that it was Kenshin's cenotaph. He spent 15 minutes to report the process of him and Yun Yao exploring the ancient tomb to Chu Tianqing." Chapter 371. Chu Tianqing had long known that the Longshan ancient tomb must be the tomb of a powerhouse from 1,000 years ago. If he could enter the ancient tomb and obtain the inheritance or treasures of the powerhouse, It would definitely strengthen the foundation and strength of the Sky Pillar sect. Because of this, he sent the elders and deacons of the sect to guard the Longshan ancient tomb day and night. But he never expected that the ancient tomb was Kenshin's mausoleum. Although it was only a cenotaph, the tomb contained Kenshin's treasures, which were obtained by Ji Tianqing, allowing Ji Tianqing to be reborn and his strength to advance by leaps and bounds. This was definitely an unexpected surprise. Of course, Chu Tianqing had heard of the legends of Kenshin and knew what kind of powerhouse Kenshin was. Ji Tianqing being able to obtain Kenshin's treasures was definitely a great blessing for the Sky Pillar sect. Chu Tianqing looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes and said solemnly, "Tianqing, this is your destiny and also your good fortune. You must cherish it and work harder. You, Yuniao, and Yender are all my disciples. They are also the disciples that I value the most. In the future, after I abdicate, you will have to take charge and assist the Sky Pillar sect's 1,000-year-old foundation. You must understand that you are shouldering the hopes of me and thousands of people in the sect." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He cupped his hands and said, "Don't worry, master. This disciple will definitely not let you down." Very good." Chu Tianqing nodded in satisfaction and said with a pleasant expression, "Tianqing, Yun Yao, you are both tired and sleepy. Go and rest." This disciple will take his leave. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao bowed to him and turned to leave the Sky Pillar Palace. The two walked out of the palace and stepped side by side into the square in front of the palace. They talked in low voices as they walked. It was early in the morning, and the square was empty. There was only fallen leaves and dust on the ground. After getting along with each other for a few days, the distance between Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had been shortened again. The way the two of them strolled side by side was somewhat intimate, but neither of them noticed it, nor did they feel that there was anything unusual or inappropriate about it. And in the corner of the square, behind a tall statue, there was a young man dressed in gray clothes, spying on the two of them with gloomy eyes. This young man in gray linen clothes was obviously a part-time disciple. He was holding a wooden bucket in his left hand and a rag in his right. He was wiping the dust off the statue. His figure was thin, and his handsome face was sickly pale. His temperament was somewhat feminine. He was Bai Wuchen. Ever since he lost to Ji Tianqing in the Heaven List tournament and recovered from his injuries, he had no choice but to fulfill the terms of the bet. He took off his inner sect white robe and put on a gray linen robe to become a servant disciple. For nearly a month, he had to clean the square and several palaces of the Red Firmament Peak every day. Just now, Bai Wuchen was cleaning up when he heard footsteps and voices coming from the square. He instinctively glanced over and saw Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. He saw the two of them walking side by side intimately like a couple in love. His body stiffened instantly, and his face became paler. His eyes were as cold as ice. It's only been 2 months since we last met, and Ji Tianqing has undergone a complete transformation. It's as if he's a completely different person. Ji Tianqing's high-spirited appearance made him feel ashamed of his inferiority. Ji Tianqing's strength and status were something that a servant disciple like him could only look up to. No matter how unwilling he was, no matter how angry and jealous he had to admit a fact. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were a perfect match. They were a match made in heaven. Thinking of this, his face twisted in anger, and his eyes were almost spitting fire. "No, Yun Yao is mine. Ji Tianqing, you damn bastard. How dare you steal my sweetheart? I'll never let you go." Bai Wuchen glared viciously at Ji Tianqing and roared silently in his heart. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao walked side by side through the square in front of the palace. Their figures gradually disappeared. The two of them did not notice that there was a servant disciple hiding behind a statue in the corner of the square with a ferocious expression. After leaving the square in front of the palace, the two of them stopped at the same time. Ji Tianqing looked at Yun Yao's beautiful face and said, "Eldest senior sister, I'm going to the Grand Peace Palace later to visit old Master Xiang." Yun Yao nodded. "Go ahead then. I won't go with you." "Okay, you've worked hard these few days. Go back and have a good rest." Ji Tianqing reminded her and waved goodbye to her. After the two of them parted, Yun Yao went straight back to the White Cloud Hall to rest. Ji Tianqing went down the Red Cloud Peak and hurried to the Grand Peace Palace. When he arrived at the entrance of the Grand Peace Palace, the mute sword slave was sweeping the fallen leaves in front of the door. Seeing that he had arrived, the sword slave was obviously startled. Then he squeezed out a smile and nodded at him. Ji Tianqing also nodded at the sword slave. Then he stepped through the door and entered the Grand Peace Palace. When he entered the third courtyard and saw Xiang Wuji was still as usual. He was holding a white jade kettle and watering the herbs while humming a tune. Ji Tianqing came to the courtyard with a smile in his eyes. He cupped his hands and bowed to Xiang Wuji. "Greetings, Senior Xiang." Xiang Wuji stopped watering the herbs and turned to look at him with a mocking smile on his old face. "Kid, do you still remember your surname?" "Huh." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and smiled playfully. "Old master, are you blaming me for not visiting you for a long time?" Xiang Wuji rolled his eyes in annoyance. He put away the jade kettle and turned to walk into the guest hall. "Kid, you've been so happy recently, and you've been flirting with that girl Yin Yao. You're about to become famous in the heavenly stellar region and bring home a beauty. How would you remember an old man like me?" Xiang Wuji's tone was a bit strange. He was purposely mocking Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not feel awkward. He followed him into the guest hall and said playfully, "You've been taking care of the plants all day. You're so carefree. How would I dare to disturb you? Then again, there have been a lot of things going on recently. I really can't leave. You're so magnanimous, so don't be so narrow-minded." Xiang Wuji sat down on the rattan chair. He took out a green wine gourd and drank a mouthful. Then he gave a cold laugh. "Yo, I haven't seen you for half a month and you've grown even more? You dare to call this old man narrow-minded?" Ji Tianqing hurriedly changed the topic, trying to evade the topic. "Half a month? I haven't come to the Graydon Palace in 2 months." Xiang Wuji glared at him in annoyance. "Nonsense. Half a month ago, you were lying unconscious in the spiritual medicine hall. This old man even went to help you heal twice." So it's like this." Ji Tianqing finally understood. He smiled and said, "Thank you, elder, for saving me." "Don't give me that." Xiang Wuji curled his lips and said in annoyance, "Kid, you didn't die from Gao Yi's palm, but you scared this old man half to death. You finally recovered from your injuries, and you went to the Dragon Mountain to break the array. Now you're still alive and kicking. You even broke through to the Yuandan stage. Kid, how is your luck so good?" Ji Tianqing looked at him with a faint smile. He did not refute. He understood Xiang Wuji very well. He knew that Xiang Wuji had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. He liked to nag when he had nothing to do. As expected, Xiang Wuji said with a stern face, "Kid, don't forget. You are the direct disciple of the sect leader. In the future, you will inherit the position of sect leader. This old man and your master have high hopes for you. We don't want to see you in danger. What if an accident happens one day and you lose your little life? Remember this for this old man. In the future, if you encounter a life-threatening situation, stay as far away as you can. Let others take care of it." Chapter 372. After Xiang Wuji finished nagging, Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded, replying with a sentence. "Old master, thank you for your care and love. I will remember your advice." Seeing him humbly accept his advice, Xiang Wuji was even more worried. "You brat. Don't just agree, I think you don't even remember it." Ji Tianqing saw that he was going to continue lecturing him and quickly changed the topic. "That's right, old master. I came to visit you today because I have something to ask." Xiang Wuji finally stopped. He glanced at him and asked, "What is it? Alchemy or setting up formations?" "Neither." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said seriously, "I want to ask you about the last few moves of the flying star sword technique." Xiang Wuji frowned and looked at him out of the corner of his eyes. He shook his head and said, "Even though you have a great opportunity and your power has increased to the Yuandan realm, the last few moves can only be learned by those in the Sky Yuan realm." Ji Tianqing quickly said, "No problem. You can just teach it to me. I will learn it as I see fit." "Oh, you brat, you have quite the tone. You don't want to give up?" Xiang Wuji raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Ji Tianqing said without changing his expression, "No matter if I succeed or not, I just want to try my best and think of a way to increase my power." Xiang Wuji frowned and then had an idea. He smiled and said, "All right, since you have the courage, then we can make a bet. I will teach you the complete flying star sword technique. If you cannot learn it, then stay in the Great Peace Palace and sweep the floor for me for a month." Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and showed a confident smile. "Then what if I can learn it?" Xiang Wuji snorted coldly and said, "Humph. If you can learn it, Then I will help you increase the power of the little black dragon and the little fox, and let them return to the Yuan-Dan realm." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing nodded without hesitation and said, "Deal." "He, since you don't believe it, then I won't be polite." Xiang Wuji grinned, put away the green wine gourd, and stood up with a solemn expression. He raised his right palm and secretly circulated his true essence, silently executing a secret technique of the profound way. A moment later, a dazzling white light gathered in his palm and condensed into a bean-sized ball of light. This ball of dazzling white light was the essence that Xiang Wuji had condensed using a secret technique. It contained the complete flying star sword technique. When martial arts experts impart their skills to others, they don't need any secret manuals. Experts used profound Tao secret arts to condense the memories and experiences in their minds into balls of light and impart them to others. Xiang Wuji slowly raised his right palm and placed it on Ji Tianqing's forehead. The white ball of light immediately entered Ji Tianqing's mind. Suddenly, a huge amount of information appeared in Ji Tianqing's mind. He was shaken by the boundless amount of information, and his consciousness became a little blurry. He quickly sat cross-legged on the ground and circulated his energy to refine the ball of white light, absorbing and comprehending the flying star sword technique. Xiang Wuji sat back on the rattan chair and smiled as he watched him cultivate. Then he took out the wine gourd and drank. As time passed, Ji Tianqing's consciousness was immersed in the flying star sword technique. He was fully focused on comprehending the sword technique. His consciousness merged with the ball of white light and was immediately immersed in it. He saw a special technique imparting scene. In the scene was a green grassland. On the left was a clear lake, and on the right was a 1,000-jong tall mountain. In the sky above the grassland, there was an old man in a purple robe with a powerful aura. It was Xiang Wuji. Xiang Wuji stood proudly in the sky and said in a serious tone, "The flying star sword technique is a heaven origin level sword technique created by Wuji Zhenren. There are 5 moves in total. This sword technique is the culmination of all that I have learned in my life. It combines the sword techniques of 39 sword sects on the continent. When cultivated to perfection, it has the power to change the sky and the sun, to pluck the stars and the moon." Ji Tianqing's consciousness was focused on the scene. When he heard Xiang Wuji's bragging, he couldn't help but want to laugh. Even though a heaven origin level cultivator was powerful, there was a limit to the power of his martial arts. At most, he could break mountains and rivers. As for the power to change the sky and pluck the stars and the moon, it was already comparable to a deity. It was far beyond a heaven origin level cultivator. Then, Xiang Wuji said in a serious tone, "The first move of the flying star sword technique, 1,000 feather blade." As he spoke, Xiang Wuji formed a sword spell with both hands and released 3 flaming sword auras. They pierced towards the mountain on the right. Each of the sword auras was 10 meters long. They were extremely powerful and quickly pierced through the forest on the mountain. In just 5 seconds, the 3 flaming sword auras had pierced through the forest 1,000 times. The forest on the mountainside was burned to ashes. After performing the first move, Xiang Wuji said in a serious tone, "The second move, Wind Thunder Strike." He then used all of his power and released 2 giant golden sword auras towards the grassland in front of him. The 2 20-meter-long sword auras collided with each other. They turned into a giant thunderbolt and slashed towards the grassland. Boom! A 100-meter-wide crater was created in the ground with a loud sound. Mud and grass were sent flying in all directions. Then Xiang Wuji performed the third move, Red Dragon Flash. He released a gigantic sword light that was over 100 meters long and actually split the 1,000-meter-tall mountain in half with a single slash. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing understood that this was the real power of the Red Dragon Flash when Xiang Wuji used all of his power. He had already mastered the first 3 moves of the Flying Star Sword technique. Then, when Xiang Wuji performed the 4th move, he paid extra attention to it. The 4th move, Water Split. Xiang Wuji shouted in a low voice. He formed a sword spell with both hands and used all of his power. He formed a giant sword aura that was 100 meters long. He performed the spell and controlled the sword aura to slash towards the clear lake on the left. With a deafening boom, the heaven-cleaving sword of light extended to several thousand meters long. It erupted with devastating power, cleaving the lake in half. The clear lake water was split apart and a 1,000-meter-long gully appeared on the surface of the lake, revealing the bottom of the lake. After a long while, the gully began to close up. The lake water that was split apart began to close up again and calm down. Ji Tianqing's heart was beating fast. He was both shocked and excited. He memorized the sword formula of the fourth move, water flow severance, and secretly analyzed it. Just then, Xiang Wuji said in a serious tone, "Next is the last move of the flying star sword technique. Shatter the mountain and river." As his voice fell, he slowly waved his palms and made a mysterious gesture. His entire body lit up with multicolored light that shot into the sky. In the next second, his silhouette flashed in the sky. His hands continued to form giant sword auras that shot in all directions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The entire grassland and the sky were engulfed by the sword auras. Everything became dazzling and chaotic. When tens of thousands of sword auras exploded at the same time, the terrifying power was enough to destroy the heaven and earth. Chapter 373. After the 5 moves of the flying star sword technique were displayed, the image disappeared. Ji Tianqing's consciousness returned to his body, and he began to study and comprehend the last 2 moves of the sword technique. The 2 sword techniques, water flow split and mountain and river smash, truly had the terrifying power to split rivers and shatter mountains. Without a doubt, this was a sword technique that only a heaven origin powerhouse could perform. If Ji Tianqing was only at the 9th level of the mystic comprehending stage and had not refined the heavenly star pearl, he would not be able to cultivate these 2 sword techniques. However, after refining the heavenly star pearl, his strength skyrocketed to the 3rd level of the origin core stage, and he merged with the Kenshin bloodline. His innate talent reached the limit of the human race. After concentrating on comprehending for 12 hours, he actually comprehended the essence of the 2 sword techniques and successfully learned them. Although he was only at the origin core stage, his Kenshin bloodline was extremely heaven-defying, allowing him to possess an inhuman comprehension ability. He could master any sword art in the world with twice the results with half the effort. After 12 hours, it was already late at night. The night sky was filled with stars, scattering starlight for millions of miles, covering the courtyard with a layer of bright moonlight. Xiang Wuji was still lying on the rattan chair. He was drunk and snoring rhythmically. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. He stood up, dusted his sleeves, and turned to look at Xiang Wuji beside him with a smile on his face. Old master is still guarding here after drinking too much. Is he afraid that something will happen to me while I'm comprehending the sword technique? He muttered in his heart, walked to Xiang Wuji's side, and called out softly, "Old master, wake up. I've finished cultivating." Xiang Wuji was sleeping soundly when he was immediately awakened. He opened his eyes with a dazed expression and asked in a muffled voice, "What? You're getting married?" Ji Tianqing looked at him speechlessly and decided not to talk to someone who was not awake yet. Xiang Wuji shook his head to clear his head. Only then did he wake up. He raised his head to look at Ji Tianqing and asked angrily, "You finished cultivating? Have you finished cultivating? If you haven't, then go to the woodshed and sweep the fields for this old man for a month." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and revealed a confident smile. He said in a playful tone, "Old master, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you this time. You'll have to sweep the floor yourself." After saying that, he turned around and jumped into the courtyard, starting to perform the 4th move of the flying star sword technique. "Old master, watch carefully." He put his index and middle fingers together, straight as a sword. He performed the flying star sword technique and activated 30% of his true essence. In an instant, his entire body surged with sharp sword intent that shot into the sky, and his eyes became sharp and fierce. Water split. Ji Tianqing suddenly let out a cold shout and released a 3-meter-long golden sword light. With the power to split the sky and earth, it fiercely slashed at the woodshed in the corner of the courtyard. Boom! With a muffled sound, the woodshed made of limestone bricks was instantly split into 2 halves by the huge sword aura. The entire woodshed was split in the middle, but it did not collapse. All that was left was a deep trench in the ground. The bricks and tiles on both sides of the trench were undamaged. There was not even a crack. To an origin core stage practitioner, it wasn't a difficult thing to destroy the woodshed with a single sword strike. However, to split the woodshed in half like Ji Tianqing did, without damaging the other bricks and tiles, was far too difficult. Only when one's control of true essence had reached a certain level could one do it. Xiang Wuji immediately sobered up. He stared at the trench in the woodshed, his eyes filled with shock. He did not speak. He did not praise Ji Tianxing, nor did he mock him. Ji Tianxing used 30% of his energy again and continued to perform the fifth move of the flying star sword technique. Fifth move, shatter the mountains and rivers. He slowly raised his palms as golden and crimson red flames surged out of his body and shot into the sky, erupting with peerlessly violent and fierce sword intent. In the next moment, his body flashed back and forth in the yard. He waved his palms, releasing golden and crimson sword aura that covered the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hundreds and thousands of powerful sword rays immediately filled the entire courtyard. Seeing this, Xiang Wuji frowned. He waved his palms, releasing a ray of yellow light that turned into a giant shield that covered the entire yard. Almost at the same time, Ji Tianxing released thousands of sword auras. They exploded with their strongest power. Boom! Amidst the deafening noise, the courtyard with a radius of 30 meters was filled with golden and red light, turning it into a chaotic mess. The powerful and violent sword aura shattered the stone floor, 2 large trees, and a few stone benches in the courtyard, turning them into scorched earth and ruins. After a long while, the muffled sound finally dissipated. The shaking ground finally calmed down. As the true essence disappeared, Ji Tianxing's figure appeared. He stood proudly in the middle of the yard. A satisfied smile flashed across his eyes. At this time, Xiang Wuji waved his hand and removed the shield that enveloped the yard. He shouted angrily, "Little bastard! Do you want to tear down this old man's yard?" As he scolded, he rushed into the yard with quick steps. He picked up several branches that were pitch black like charcoal from the shattered ground. He revealed a pained expression and pretended to be furious as he glared at Ji Tianxing. He shouted, "This old man's azure spirit tree couldn't escape your fiendish clutches in the end. It was utterly destroyed by you, punk." Back then, when Ji Tianxing came to the Grand Peace Palace to sweep the floor for the first time, the little black dragon created a tornado, blowing off the leaves of several azure spirit trees. Now that several months had passed, the azure spirit trees grew lush branches and leaves again with much difficulty. In the end, Ji Tianxing unleashed a shatter the mountains and rivers, directly burning the few azure spirit trees into charcoal. Seeing Xiang Wuji's sorrowful and indignant appearance, Ji Tianxing squeezed out a hint of a slightly awkward smile. "Ah, old man, this was purely a mistake. I just slipped up." "Pooh, slip up my ass." Xiang Wuji spat crossly and said with a straight face, "Either way, you have to compensate this old man. Sweep the floor in the Grand Peace Palace for a month." Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows and said with a playful tone, "Old man, as the saying goes, a bet is a bet. You can't renege on the debt, right?" "What's called reneging on the debt?" Xiang Wuji glared at him and explained, "Hand over the little black dragon and the little fox. This old man will help them recover their strength. But you must be an odd job worker for this old man in the Grand Peace Palace for a month as compensation." Ji Tianxing frowned and mused for a moment. He instantly guessed something and asked probingly, "Old man, you insist on making me stay in the Grand Peace Palace for a month. Could it be that something will happen in the near future?" A glimmer of light flashed across Xiang Wuji's eyes, and he flatly denied, "No. There definitely will be." Ji Tianxing's eyes stared at him. His gaze was clear and deep, as if wanting to see through him. Xiang Wuji ignored him and turned to walk into the hall. Ji Tianxing hurriedly followed up and asked, "Old master, what's the matter? Can you not hide it from me?" Xiang Wuji stopped and turned to look at him. He said in a serious tone, "You really want to know?" "Of course." Ji Tianxing nodded without any hesitation. His expression was very firm. Xiang Wuji was silent for a moment before saying in a low voice, "I can tell you. At least you can be prepared in advance. For days ago, the Central State Imperial Court sent an imperial edict. The emperor will arrive in 5 days. The imperial edict said that the emperor will come to our sect this time to take care of the situation in the heavenly stellar region and also to see the candidates for the heavenly consort. Our sect is the leader of the heavenly stellar region and a subject of the Central State Imperial Court. We can only obey the imperial edict. When the emperor arrives, our sect can only warmly welcome him and do our best to entertain him. Tianxing, you should understand what this old man means, right?" Chapter 374. Ji Tianqing knew very well that although the Sky Pillar sect was the overlord of the Tianshan region, they were also a subject of the imperial court of Zhongzhou. The emperor was ordered to come to the Sky Pillar sect and was the most distinguished guest. The Sky Pillar sect could only do their best to entertain and take care of him. The emperor came to the Tianshan region this time not only to preside over the overall situation, but also to see the heavenly consort candidate, Yun Yao. The Sky Pillar sect could not disobey the imperial court's orders and had to let Yun Yao be examined and chosen by the emperor. However, everyone in the Sky Pillar sect knew that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were a pair and were a good couple. The emperor coming to choose the heavenly consort was equivalent to snatching Yun Yao from him. Xiang Wuji cared about his feelings and was afraid that he would not be able to hold back his impulse, so he wanted to keep him in the Greaten Palace for a month. After a month, regardless of whether Yun Yao became the heavenly consort or not, the emperor would have to leave the Sky Pillar sect. In that case, at least he would not meet the emperor head-on and have conflicts and conflicts. This was Xiang Wuji's intention. Ji Tianqing naturally understood. He nodded with a serious expression and cupped his hands at Xiang Wuji. "Old master, thank you for telling me this news." Xiang Wuji nodded slightly. His heart was a bit heavy as he comforted him in a low voice. "Kid, I also hope that lovers will get married. I want to see you and Yun Yao get married. But the imperial court is the leader of the human race, and the emperor is so noble and dazzling. If the emperor really chooses Yun Yao, that is your fate. When the time comes, don't be rash. No matter how strong you are, you will only die if you fight against the imperial court. Unless you can become a strong person like Kenshin, then you can make the imperial court bow their heads and be polite." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood and did not say anything. However, his eyes were filled with determination and unyielding. He thought to himself, if the fate of eldest senior sister and I is really so rough and difficult to reunite, I will never give up. I must master Kenshin's secret art and become as strong as Kenshin. At this moment, Xiang Wuji patted his shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Leave the little fox and the little black dragon here. You can go back and rest. 5 days later, when the emperor arrives at our sect, we must all go and welcome him." Ji Tianqing removed the 100 treasures brocade pouch from his waist and passed it to Xiang Wuji. After bidding farewell, he turned and walked out of the yard, quickly leaving Great Peace Palace. Xiang Wuji held the 100 treasures brocade pouch and stood under the eaves. He couldn't help but shake his head and sigh heavily. "Tianqing, oh Tianqing, life is all up to fate. Once the 8 characters are set, it's hard to change them. Wealth and honor have always been decided by heaven. Why do you have to go against Tianqing's fate in marriage? If you want to achieve great things and become a martial arts expert, it's not enough to just have extraordinary talent. You also need to be able to endure." However, Ji Tianqing had already left in a hurry, so he couldn't hear his sighs and sighs. Furthermore, even if Ji Tianqing heard his words, would he really accept his fate? Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing returned to Tianqing's yard. Although when Xiang Wuji told him the news of the emperor's arrival, he was nervous and felt a sense of danger. But when he returned to Tianqing's yard, his heart had calmed down. Although the emperor is of noble birth and has unparalleled talent, reaching the sky origin realm in his 20s, he can be called the #1 genius of the human race. But I may not be weaker than him. I have merged with the Kenshin bloodline and cultivated Kenshin's secret techniques. I may reach the sky origin realm in my 20s. He sat cross-legged on the bed and silently analyzed, his heart filled with confidence. Furthermore, eldest senior sister has no interest in the heavenly consort position and has no good feelings towards the emperor. I believe that she will not choose the emperor. Even if the emperor comes to our sect, in a short 10 days, they may not develop any feelings. Even if the emperor falls in love with eldest senior sister at first sight and wants to choose her as his heavenly consort, I will not let him take eldest senior sister away. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart calmed down. He put this matter aside for the time being and started to cultivate without any distractions. In a cold and elegant room in White Cloud Hall, Yun Yao, who was wearing a white dress, was sitting on a disc array made of 1,000-year-old cold jade. Her hands were holding a spell on her knees, and she was meditating quietly with her eyes closed. The bright moonlight shone through the window grill and fell on her body, covering her with a faint layer of starlight. Her figure was hazy. It was late at night, and everything was silent. White Cloud Hall was silent. Suddenly, a palm-sized, light green bird flew in from the courtyard outside the window. This bird was round and chubby, and its round little head looked a little cute. Its green feathers were bright and shiny, and it was emitting invisible spiritual chi. Its brown eyes were very lively. Swoosh! The green bird circled around the courtyard and looked around. Then it saw Yunyao in the room. Her lively eyes were filled with joy. She quickly flew to the window and wanted to get in through the window grill. However, the window grill's hole was small. It twisted its chubby body and struggled a few times before it got through. After getting into the room, it flapped its wings happily and flew toward Yunyao excitedly. Yao Yao! Yao Yao! The green bird flew to Yunyao's side and called out to her in a clear voice. Its voice was like a 10-year-old girl's, and its tone was cheerful and affectionate. Yunyao woke up immediately. When she opened her eyes, she saw the green bird in front of her. After being stunned for a moment, a surprised smile appeared on her pretty face. Little spiritual bird, why are you here? Did your family send you to deliver a message? Yes, yes. The little spiritual bird quickly nodded and jumped onto the stone table next to Yunyao. It spread its wings and lay on the table, looking exhausted. I flew all the way here from Cloud Spirit Palace for 5 days and 5 nights. My old waist is exhausted. Let me catch my breath first. Yunyao couldn't help but smile when she saw the little spiritual bird's cute and innocent appearance. She flicked her slender fingers and injected a wisp of true essence into the little spiritual bird's body. The little spiritual bird immediately became much more energetic. Little spiritual bird, tell me, who are you delivering a message for this time? The little spiritual bird quickly stood up and shook its wings. It said seriously, Yao Yao, it's a message from Madam. Oh, a message from Mother? Quickly read it to me. Yunyao raised her eyebrows and a hint of joy appeared in her eyes. She supported her chin with both hands and looked at the little spiritual bird. Her pretty face was full of anticipation. The little spiritual bird imitated Madame Yun's tone and said earnestly, Yao Yao, the Tianshan region seems to be a little unstable recently. Mother is worried, so I asked the little spiritual bird to deliver a message to you. At the end of last month, it was your grandmother's 300th birthday. The Empress and the Emperor came to Cloud Spirit Palace with gifts for your grandmother's birthday. After the banquet, the Empress and Mother talked privately about the Emperor's concubine selection. The Empress likes you very much and wants Mother to persuade you to marry the Emperor and become a heavenly concubine. Hearing this, the smile on Yunyao's pretty face disappeared and her eyes became a little serious. The little spiritual bird used Madame Yun's tone and continued, Mother knows that you and the Emperor have known each other since you were young. Although he has feelings for you, you have no feelings for him. If it weren't for hiding from him, you wouldn't have left Zhongzhou and hid in the remote Tianshan region. Yao Yao, Mother won't persuade you to agree, and I won't force you. You are the eldest daughter of the Yun family and will inherit the position of Cloud Spirit Palace Master in the future. It's up to you to choose. Chapter 375. Originally, when Yunyao learned that the Empress and the Emperor had gone to the Cloud Soul Palace to celebrate the birthday and mentioned the Emperor's concubine selection, her expression was a little serious. After hearing the little spiritual bird's report, her mood became a lot better and a smile appeared on her pretty face. Mother loves me the most, Yunyao muttered to herself, and a trace of warmth and intimacy gushed out from her heart. After the little spiritual bird passed on Madame Yun's message, it stared at Yunyao. It tilted its round little head and asked, Yao Yao, do you have any words for Madam? Yes, of course. Yunyao smiled and nodded. Then, she said in a calm and gentle tone, Mother, I'm doing well in the Tianshan region. You and Father don't have to worry about me. In a few days, the Emperor will come to the Tianshan region. If he continues to pester me, I'll explain it to him and let him give up on this idea. After leaving the Cloud Soul Palace, I've been wandering in the Tianshan region for many years. I've gained a lot of experience and my strength has increased a lot. I won't be returning to the Cloud Soul Palace for a while. If I run into trouble that I can't solve, I'll send a message to Mother and Father for help. Mother, you don't have to worry. Mother, send my regards to Father. You two take care of yourselves. After speaking, she reached out and patted the little spiritual bird's head. She smiled and said, All right, I've finished speaking. Little spiritual bird, You should go back and report. The little spiritual bird nodded and said reluctantly, Yao Yao, then I'll go back to the Cloud Soul Palace. You have to come back soon too. Yes, go on. Yun Yao replied and waved her hand to signal it to go back. The little spiritual bird flapped its wings and turned into a green spiritual light. It flew out of the window with a whoosh. Yun Yao watched the little spiritual bird disappear into the night. She looked at the moonlight outside the window and thought calmly. After a while, she looked away. Her eyes and mood became as calm as water. She continued to meditate and cultivate. In the Tianjin sect, at the top of the Golden Jade Peak. Ever since the Divine Sword Peak had been destroyed by Chu Tiansheng, the Golden Jade Peak, where the spiritual medicine hall had been located, had become the main peak of the Tianjin sect. The Tianjin sect master and many elders and deacons built several new palaces on the Golden Jade Peak to serve as residences and halls for handling sect affairs. In a dimly lit secret room in the newly built Divine Sword Palace, the head of the Tianjin sect was sitting on a large chair made of fire jade. His expression was grave as he pondered. In the middle of the secret chamber in front of him stood two people. They were his right-hand men, Taoist Tianji and guest elder Huangfu. Honorable guest Huangfu reported solemnly, Sect Master, after 20 days of hard work, our disciples and servants have restored half of the Divine Sword Peak. The Tianjin sect master listened to his report with a calm expression and a gloomy look in his eyes. Ever since he had been injured by Chu Tiansheng, he had gone into seclusion to recuperate for more than half a month. Since then, his temperament and character had become increasingly gloomy. It was obvious that deep hatred and resentment were hidden in his heart. In the past, he was like an unsheathed treasured sword with a sharp and domineering aura. But now, he was like a gloomy and vicious viper, curled up in a cold corner. If he had the chance, he would attack fiercely. A moment later, after Honorable Guest Elder Huangfu finished his report, the Tianjin sect master nodded slightly and said in a low and hoarse voice, "Pass down the order. Let everyone continue to work hard and restore the Divine Sword Peak as soon as possible." Understood. Honorable Guest Elder Huangfu saluted and left. Then, Taoist Tianji stepped forward and held the silver horsetail whisk. His expression was calm as he said, Sect Master, tonight we received news that the great array of the Dragon Mountain tomb was broken by the Sky Pillar sect a few days ago. Sect Master, our time has finally come. It's time to seek justice from the Sky Pillar sect. A debt of blood must be paid in blood. Taoist Tianji's emotions and tone revealed deep hatred and passion. It could invisibly stir up the blood of the crowd. The Tianjin sect master frowned. His eyes flashed with a cold light and surged with killing intent. However, he shook his head and said in a low voice, "Our revenge will be taken sooner or later. The Sky Pillar sect will definitely be destroyed by our sect. But now is not the time. We must endure. The Emperor of the Middle State Imperial Court will soon arrive at the Tianshan region. The Emperor has ordered the Emperor to come to the Tianshan region to preside over the situation. Let's wait and see if the Emperor can bring justice to our sect. If the Imperial Court wants to protect the Sky Pillar sect, we can only attack them after the Emperor leaves the Tianshan region." Taoist Tianji frowned. He was somewhat disappointed and disdainful. "Stupid and cowardly fellow. Your lair has been destroyed, but you can still endure and wait for others to help you seek justice. What can a cowardly piece of trash like you do when you watch a great opportunity slip away? What can you accomplish?" Although he thought this in his heart, he didn't show it on his face. He cupped his hands and bowed to the Tianjin sect master. He said seriously, "Sect master is right. This is the safest way." After he finished speaking, he bowed to the Tianjin sect master and left the secret room. The next morning, Ji Tianqing finished his cultivation and walked out of his room. The sun had just risen, and the mountain peak was still filled with a thin mist. There was still sparkling dew between the branches and leaves of the roadside flowers. He walked out of the Tianqing courtyard, breathed in the fresh air, and walked around the mountain peak. When he walked to the inner sect square, he saw several odd-job disciples in gray linen clothes cleaning the square and putting up colorful paper and lanterns. The odd-job disciples were whispering to each other as they worked. Ji Tianqing was far away from them, but his hearing was excellent, so he naturally heard them clearly. A skinny odd-job disciple was whispering to the others, "You guys work faster. Don't make any mistakes. This time, a great benefactor is coming." Another odd-job disciple, who was younger and only in his teens, asked curiously, "Senior brother, isn't our sect the #1 sect in the Tiantian domain? What kind of benefactor is more noble than our sect?" Humph. You don't understand, do you? The skinny disciple said proudly, "I heard from the deacons in the sect that a big shot from the imperial court will be coming to our sect soon. It is said that the benefactor is called the Son of Heaven. Even our sect master and elders have to bow to him when they see him." Hearing what he said, the other odd job workers all had shocked expressions on their faces as they let out cries of surprise. The Son of Heaven? Is it the crown prince of the imperial court? Even our sect master and elders have to bow to him? Isn't the identity of the Son of Heaven too noble? Where is the imperial court? Why have I never heard of it? Is our sect also under the jurisdiction of the imperial court? The thin odd job disciple was too lazy to explain too much. He lowered his voice and said, "You won't understand even if I tell you these things. Don't ask so much. Anyway, just follow me and finish the work that the deacons have given you. In the next few days, we not only have to clean up the inner sect palace, but also decorate it with lanterns and decorations." Chapter 376. Ji Tianqing frowned when he heard the discussion of the few janitor disciples. He thought for a moment before remembering that there were still 4 days before the Son of Heaven would arrive at the Sky Pillar sect. When he thought up to here, he lost interest in taking a stroll and turned around to return to the Tianqing courtyard. The Sky Pillar sect was busy decorating with lanterns and decorations. These things were arranged by the elders and deacons, and the janitor disciples completed them. It didn't have much to do with him. He couldn't be bothered to pay attention to these trivial matters. After returning to the Tianqing courtyard, he asked the maidservant, Xiao Shuang, to close the door and wouldn't receive any guests for the next few days. He said a few words to the maidservant, Xiao Shuang, then entered the secret room to circulate his cultivation. After refining the heavenly star pearl and fusing with the Kenshin bloodline, his strength skyrocketed to the 3rd level of the origin core stage. It could be said to be a leap in improvement. On the path of the martial Tao, if one wanted to become a true expert, then one must have a solid foundation and gradually increase one's strength. He must cultivate calmly for a period of time to stabilize his martial Tao foundation and properly consolidate his strength and cultivation. In the next 3 days, the Sky Pillar sect's disciples and janitor disciples were busy. In a short 3 days, the enormous sect became completely new, and there were lanterns and decorations everywhere. The 9 mountain peaks, over 1,000 palaces, and courtyards were cleaned until they were clean and spotless. The thousands of janitor disciples were filled with excitement as they passionately discussed the Son of Heaven's imminent arrival. Many people had never heard of the Central State Imperial Court, nor did they know who the Imperial Monarch and the Son of Heaven were. Everyone only knew that the person who came to the Sky Pillar sect this time was a great figure with a supreme status, and he could collapse the Skystar region with a stomp of his feet. The warm and jubilant atmosphere lasted for an entire 3 days. On the evening of the 3rd day, group after group of experts arrived at the Sky Pillar sect's entrance. The guards guarding the entrance immediately recognized these experts. These experts were the sect leaders and chief disciples of the other 7 great sections. The Tianjin sect's sect leader and guest elder Huangfu, Granny Shuiyu, Fengmin, sect leader Yan Wuyu, and the others had all entered the Sky Pillar sect. The sect leaders of the various sects brought their chief disciples to the Sky Pillar sect, so they naturally had to welcome and pay respects to the Son of Heaven. The Sky Pillar sect had made the corresponding arrangements long ago, and arranged a few courtyards in the outer court for the sect leaders and disciples of the 7 sects to temporarily stay. After one night, a new day arrived. Today was the day that the Son of Heaven would arrive at the sky-bearing sect. Everyone in the sect was filled with curiosity and anticipation. They got up early in the morning to wait. Ji Tianqing also ended his closed-door cultivation. He walked out of the secret room and left the Tianqing courtyard. Half an hour later, he ascended the peak of Heaven Upholding Peak and arrived at the square outside Heaven Upholding Hall. At this time, dozens of people had already gathered in the square in front of the hall. They were standing in the square and chatting with each other. The person standing at the front was naturally Chu Tianqing. Behind him stood a row of experts. They were the leaders of the 7 major sections. Further back in the 3rd row were the chief disciples of the various sections. Yun Yao was among them. The 4th row had the most people. There were more than a dozen people. 9 of them were elders of the Sky Pillar sect, and the others were elders of the various sections. Everyone was dressed neatly and stood in the middle of the field with solemn expressions. They looked at the sky in front of them, waiting for the arrival of the emperor. When Ji Tianqing arrived at the square, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. The gazes of the various sect leaders and chief disciples all looked at him in unison and converged on him. The few sect leaders were all heavenly origin stage experts, so they were naturally able to discern with a glance that Ji Tianqing's strength had already reached the 3rd level of the origin core stage. Instantly, the few sect leaders' faces went grim, and their eyes revealed shock. Granny Shuiyu, the 6 Harmony sect's sect leader Yen, and the Pill Cauldron sect's sect leader Qi were all filled with surprise and felt it was unbelievable. Besides being filled with shock, the 3 sect leaders of the True Martial sect, Windfire sect, and Thousand Autumn sect were also filled with dense jealousy. The Tianjian sect's sect leader's mood was the worst. His chest was filled with rage, and his gaze that was gloomy like ice stared at Ji Tianqing. If looks could kill, Ji Tianqing would have been cut into pieces by his gaze. No one was able to believe that in a short period of a month, Ji Tianqing had actually broken through to the origin core stage and even reached the 3rd level of the origin core stage. This was simply an unbelievable miracle. When they saw another genius that was as outstanding as Yun Yao had appeared in the Sky Pillar sect, all the sect leaders felt an enormous pressure. Especially the Tianjian sect's sect leader. He even secretly swore in his heart that he would definitely destroy the Sky Pillar sect as soon as possible. He would absolutely not give the Sky Pillar sect a chance to continue developing and strengthening, and he would not sit idly by and watch Ji Tianqing, this hidden danger, become a powerhouse. At that time, he would seek revenge from Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing walked into the square with a calm expression and stood still beside Yun Yao. Both he and Yun Yao didn't open their mouths to speak. The two of them glanced at each other and saw the deep meaning in each other's eyes. After a brief exchange of glances, the two of them looked ahead calmly and silently waited. The chief disciples of the various sects all noticed Ji Tianqing's abnormality, and they felt that he seemed to have changed into a different person. So they secretly sized him up and observed him. Time silently flowed by, and an hour quickly passed by. The morning sun gradually rose into the sky and sprinkled light golden sunlight onto the square before the hall. Right at this moment, a dragon's roar that shook the 9 heavens suddenly sounded out in the sky before Crimson Sky Peak. Roar! An incomparably huge golden figure, draped in light golden sunlight, galloped over from the distant sky like a golden stream of light. Everyone in the square immediately looked up at the sky in front of them with a solemn expression, and their gazes converged on the golden stream of light. Amidst the dazzling golden stream of light, there was an extremely majestic and mighty golden-scaled flood dragon with a body that was 1,000 meters long. The flood dragon had 2 huge dragon heads, and the antle-like dragon horns on its head shone with a brilliant golden light. Its 2 pairs of dark silver dragon eyes looked down at everyone in the square condescendingly, and its eyes revealed an aura of indifference to the common people. Although the golden-scaled flood dragon was still far away from everyone, its powerful dragon aura and sacred aura enveloped the entire Crimson Sky Peak, causing everyone to feel a strong sense of fear and awe in their hearts. 2 people stood on the back of the double-headed flood dragon, and they were looking down at everyone in the square. Standing in front was a handsome young man in his early 20s. He wore an exquisite golden robe, a square dragon and phoenix golden crown on his head, a purple gold belt inlaid with jade, and a pair of wind cloud boots on his feet. His entire body was filled with an incomparable aura of nobility. His fair and handsome face was as clear as jade, and even faintly glowed with a jade-like crystalline luster. He had sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and a straight nose. His thin lips were tightly pursed, revealing a somewhat confident and indifferent temperament. A pair of clear eyes, as deep and vast as the sea of stars, flashed with quick-wittedness and wisdom. What a peerlessly handsome face, as if it was the work of a god. However, his figure was slightly thin and frail, and he did not have the burly body of an emperor and the domineering aura of an emperor. Chapter 377. Although there was another person on the back of the double-headed dragon. It was a burly middle-aged man wearing golden armor. He was dressed like an imperial general. However, everyone in the square ignored the imperial general and focused their attention on the handsome young man. Everyone knew that the incomparably noble Son of Heaven had finally arrived at the Sky Pillar sect. The sect leaders and elders of the various sects were in awe, and their eyes were shining with excitement. The chief disciples of the various sects looked up at the Tianzi on the back of the golden dragon with deep reverence. Among the crowd, only two people's expressions remained unchanged. They were still calm and indifferent. These two people were Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Swoosh! The double-headed dragon flew above everyone's head, bringing with it a powerful gust of wind and invisible pressure. The trees around the square were swaying from the strong wind, and the robes of the people in the square were also fluttering. The dragon circled twice above the square before rolling its 1,000-meter-long dragon body into 3 circles and slowly landing on the square. Boom! The moment the 5 dragon claws landed on the ground, 5 large pits appeared on the granite floor. Dense cracks appeared all around, and the entire mountain peak began to tremble. Everyone's pupils constricted, and they were secretly shocked. They were even more in awe of the legendary imperial court and the Tianzi. Swoosh! Swoosh! The Tianzi was the first to jump off the dragon's back. His figure flashed and landed on the square. The imperial general also followed his footsteps and landed on the square. He stood silently 3 steps behind the Tianzi. The Tianzi raised his left hand and waved at the double-headed golden dragon. The double-headed golden dragon let out a low roar. Its body flickered with golden light, and its body immediately shrank rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the 1,000-meter-long golden dragon body shrank to the extreme and turned into a dark gold thumb ring with 2 dragons playing with a pearl. It was worn on the Tianzi's left thumb. Only then did the Tianzi retract his left hand. He put his hands behind his back and walked towards the crowd with majestic steps. He stood 10 steps away from Chu Tiansheng and looked at the crowd calmly. His indifferent eyes only swept across Chu Tiansheng, the sect leaders, and the chief disciples in the first 3 rows. As for the elders of the various sects, they were all ignored by him. Of course, when his eyes swept over Yun Yao, he paused for a moment, and a smile that no one noticed flashed in his eyes. At this moment, everyone bowed in unison, clasped their hands together, and bowed to the emperor. We, the martial artists of the Tianshan region, welcome the emperor. Greetings to the benevolent Saint Emperor. The voices of the crowd converged into a torrent of sound waves, reverberating in the air above the square, filled with reverence. The emperor nodded slightly without any expression on his face. He raised his hands and said with a calm voice, "Everyone, please don't stand on ceremony. Rise." Only then did everyone stand up, put down their hands, and stared at the Son of Heaven, closely examining his true appearance. Tianzi's gaze fell on Chu Tiansheng. His tone was calm and majestic as he said, "Is this the current sect master of the sky-bearing sect, Sect Master Chu Tiansheng?" Chu Tiansheng hurriedly cupped his hands in salute and said respectfully, reporting to the emperor, "It is this subject." The emperor nodded and didn't say anything. Chu Tiansheng hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, we are here to welcome your Majesty. We are here to listen to the orders of the imperial court and also to see the emperor's true appearance. We are also looking forward to your Majesty coming down to preside over the overall situation of the Tianshan region. This subject has already arranged everything in the main hall. Your Majesty, please come to the main hall for a chat." After that, Chu Tiansheng bowed and stretched out his hand, making a pleased gesture. The Son of Heaven nodded and led the imperial generals to the main hall. Chu Tiansheng accompanied him on his left and right, leading the way for him. The sect masters, elders, and disciples followed closely behind. After 100 breaths, everyone entered the sky-bearing palace and took their seats in the main hall. At such a solemn moment and occasion, the arrangement of the seats was, of course, very particular. Of course, the emperor sat on the sect master's throne. The imperial guards stood beside him like stone sculptures, looking dignified and looking straight ahead. The sect masters and sect masters of the 8 major sects were divided into 2 rows, sitting on the left and right sides of the main hall. The one on the left was Chu Tiansheng, and the other 3 were Granny Shuiyu, Sect Master Yen of the 6 He sect, and Sect Master Qi of the Pill Tripod sect. The 4 sect masters on the right side of the main hall, with the Tianjian sect master as the leader, sat in the main seat. The other 3 were the sect masters of the True Martial sect, the Windfire sect, and the Qianqiu sect. As for the elders and chief disciples of the various sects, they were not qualified to sit. They all stood behind their own sect masters. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood side by side behind Chu Tianqing. Feng Min stood behind Granny Shuiyu, and Wu Yu stood behind Sect Master Yan, behind the Tianjin sect master. There was only a guest elder, Huangfu. After all, Shi Wenyu had died long ago, and the Tianjin sect had yet to appoint a new chief disciple. Tian Ziduan's dignified gaze swept across everyone present, and he said solemnly, "Fellow Taoists, I came to the Tianjin region under the orders of the imperial court to preside over the overall situation of the Tianjin region. Only by maintaining the stability of the Tianjin region can we ensure the peace and prosperity of our race, and that the people can live and work in peace and not be disturbed by the flames of war. Sect masters, you are in charge of the foundation of your sects and occupy the ancient star realm. Naturally, you have the responsibility to guard the peace of your region. I am here to preside over the overall situation, so I need all of you to cooperate well." The 8 sect masters nodded inwardly. They stared at Tian Ziduan with faint anticipation in their hearts. All of the sect masters were well aware of the conflict between the Tianjin sect and the Sky Pillar sect. Everyone secretly wondered what Tian Ziduan's attitude would be. How would he resolve this matter? At this moment, Tian Ziduan continued, "I am new here and do not understand the situation. Sect masters, please introduce yourselves first." Chu Tianqing stood up first, cupped his hands, and bowed to Tian Ziduan, introducing himself. Immediately after, Granny Shuiyu, Sect Master Yan, Sect Master Qi, and the others all stood up and bowed, introducing themselves. A moment later, the 8 sect masters finished introducing themselves, and Tian Ziduan also remembered everyone's names and characteristics. He looked at Chu Tianqing and asked, "Sect Master Chu, I received news a month ago that the Tianjin sect and your esteemed sect have some unresolved grievances that have even evolved to the point of fighting. I wonder if Sect Master Chu can dispel my doubts and tell me the origin of the grievances between the 2 sects, as well as the whole story?" Chu Tianqing was startled. He obviously did not expect Tian Ziduan to act so swiftly and decisively, wanting to mediate the matter as soon as they met. Before he could speak, the Tianjin sect master stood up and quickly walked to the center of the hall. The Tianjin sect master bowed to Tian Ziduan and said indignantly, "Greetings, Tian Ziduan. I am the Tianjin sect's sect master, Gao Yi." Tian Ziduan, as the number 1 sect in the Tianjin region, the Sky Pillar sect has gone too far. Not only did they kill my disciples, but they also destroyed my sect's hundreds of years of foundation. Chapter 378. The sect master of the Tianjin sect, Gao Yu, stood in the Sky Pillar Hall and angrily complained about the Sky Pillar sect's crimes. He talked nonstop, starting from 100 years ago, all the way to his birthday banquet last month. Under his description, the Sky Pillar sect had completely turned into a tyrannical and arrogant evil sect that committed all kinds of crimes. Perhaps he was acting, or perhaps he was truly sad. When he talked about how Shi Wenyu was killed, how he was injured by Chu Tianqing, and how the Divine Sword Peak was destroyed, he was still weeping. His tragic tone and cries could really move anyone who heard it and shed tears upon seeing it. When the sect masters and elders in the hall saw Gao Yu's appearance, their expressions became very complicated and many thoughts appeared in their minds. Granny Shuiyu looked at him coldly and sneered in her heart, "Gao Yu, this shameless guy, he's really not afraid of losing face. In front of the sect masters and the emperor, he can actually act so miserably and realistically. It seems that he's already shameless in order to complain about the Sky Pillar sect." Sect Master Yan and Sect Master Qi also looked at Gao Yu with strange expressions. Their eyes were filled with contempt and disdain. This Gao Yu really doesn't care about his status and face. He's completely shameless. AI, this guy can really act. He actually inverted right and wrong to falsely accuse the Sky Pillar sect. I hope the emperor won't be deceived by him. On the right side of the hall, the Thousand Autumns sect master, the True Martial sect master, and the Wind Fire sect master snickered in their hearts and agreed with Gao Yu's actions. In the hearts of the 3 sect masters, all kinds of thoughts appeared. Hee, Chu Tianqing must be stupid, right? He definitely didn't think that Gao Yu would directly complain in front of the emperor, right? Chu Tianqing, with the emperor present, let's see how you explain this time. The emperor doesn't know the inside story and will definitely be deceived by Gao Yu in this situation. Even if it's to appease Gao Yu, he will definitely blame or severely punish the Sky Pillar sect. Chu Tianqing's expression was naturally gloomy. His eyes were cold from the shameless Gao Yu, and his hands were trembling. However, the emperor was sitting in the main seat and listening to Gao Yu's complaints expressionlessly. He couldn't rashly stand up to defend himself. In that case, if he quarreled with Gao Yi in public, not only would he not be able to clear his name, but it would also have the opposite effect. He did his best to suppress his anger, but a cold smile hung on his lips as he glared at Gao Yi, watching Gao Yi's performance. Finally, after a quarter of an hour, Gao Yi finished speaking. He waved his sleeves to wipe away the tears on his face, bowed deeply to the emperor, and begged, "Your Majesty, you must seek justice for me." The Thousand Autumns sect leader, the True Martial sect leader, and the Wind and Fire sect leader exchanged glances and hurriedly stood up to salute the emperor. They cupped their fists and said, "Your Majesty the Emperor, everything that sect leader Gao said just now is true. We are willing to testify for him." Tianzi had been silently listening to Gao Yi's words. There was no change in his expression on his handsome face. Seeing the three sect leaders step forward to testify for Gao Yi, an imperceptible light flashed in his eyes. He nodded lightly and said calmly, "Sect masters, please take your seats. Although sect leader Gao's experience makes one sigh, I am new here and am not clear about the grudges between the sects in the Tianjin region. This monarch cannot make any conclusions about this matter based on your one-sided statement. However, sect leader Gao, don't worry. I will investigate this matter as soon as possible and give you an answer." Tianzi's words and attitude were neutral. He wasn't deceived or influenced by Gao Yi at all. This made Gao Yi, the Thousand Autumns sect leader, and the others feel a little disappointed. However, they had already expected this result. They also guessed that Tianzi, as the #1 genius of the human race, was a wise person and wouldn't easily believe the words of others. However, Gao Yi put on a pitiful expression and took the initiative to complain to Tianzi. No matter what, this would create a preconceived notion in Tianzi's mind. The Sky Pillar sect was strong and domineering, while the Tianjin sect was weak and pitiful, being bullied by the Sky Pillar sect. Thus, Gao Yi's goal was achieved. Immediately after, Tianzi turned to look at Chu Tianqing and expressionlessly asked, "Sect Master Chu, do you have anything to say about what Sect Master Gao just said?" Chu Tianqing immediately stood up and walked to the center of the hall. He said in a deep voice, "Reporting to Your Majesty Tianzi, what Gao Yi said was nonsense." He inverted black and white, confusing right and wrong. Since Gao Yi had shamelessly made a scene in front of everyone and slandered the Sky Pillar sect in front of everyone in the hall, Tianzi didn't dare to offend the Sky Pillar sect. Of course, Chu Tianqing wouldn't give the Tianjin sect any face. He mercilessly refuted Gao Yi's words and used extremely sharp words to denounce Gao Yi for being sinister and despicable. He refuted and explained everything that Gao Yi had said to Tian. After a full half an hour, he finished explaining everything. Granny Shuiyu, sect leader Yan, and sect leader Qi all stood up and bowed to Tianzi, confirming that Chu Tianqing's words were true. Gao Yi sat on the right without saying a word. His face was also livid with anger, and his eyes were filled with anger as he stared at Chu Tianqing. Tianzi nodded expressionlessly and said calmly, "Sect leader Chu, please take a seat." The two sect leaders have different opinions about the same thing. They both have their own grievances and difficulties. It seems that the conflict between the two sects has been brewing for a long time. The grievances have accumulated over time and can no longer be easily resolved. In that case, please don't be impatient and wait patiently for a few days. After this emperor investigates clearly, I will naturally make a decision. At that time, this emperor will distinguish between right and wrong for the two sect leaders. Since Tianzi had spoken, Chu Tianqing and Gao Yi couldn't say anything more. Naturally, they nodded in agreement. Next, Tianzi looked at the other sect leaders and asked if there were any grievances between the sects that were difficult to resolve. The sect leaders were silent and hesitant. No one took the initiative to speak, and no one stood up to complain. After all, the two strongest forces in the Tianjin region were the Sky-bearing sect and the Tianjin sect. The grievances between the two sects had developed to the point where they couldn't tolerate each other and were about to go to war. This time, Tianzi came to the Tianjin region mainly to resolve the grievances between the two sects and stabilize the overall situation. Although there were some grievances between the other 6 sects, They were all small frictions and conflicts. In this kind of situation, no one was willing to talk about those small matters. It would only make people laugh and might not be able to resolve it effectively. Seeing that everyone was silent, Tianzi didn't ask anything and said in a solemn tone, "Since the 6 sects are still harmonious, then this emperor is relieved. Next, this emperor will stay in the sky-bearing sect for a while to thoroughly investigate and resolve the grievances between the 2 sects. Sect leaders, please stay in the sky-bearing sect for a few days to help this emperor understand the situation and contribute to the peace and stability of the Tianshan region." Chapter 379. After the meeting ended, the sect leaders led their elders and chief disciples out of the towering sky hall. Everyone left the red firmament peak and returned to the courtyards on the mountainside of the towering sky peak to rest. In the towering sky hall, only Tianzi, the imperial general, Chu Tiansheng, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao were left. Tianzi's gaze fell on Yun Yao, and there was a touch of emotion in the depths of his eyes. He wanted to greet Yun Yao and chat for a while, but there were others present in the hall, so it was not appropriate. Chu Tiansheng cupped his hands to Tianzi and said, "Your Majesty Tianzi, you have come all the way from Zhongzhou. The journey must be tiring, so you should rest early. I have arranged a residence for your Majesty Tianzi. Please follow me." Tianzi nodded and walked to the Sky River Palace behind the towering Sky Hall under Chu Tiansheng's lead. After Chu Tiansheng and Tianzi left, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao walked out of the hall side by side. The two stopped at the entrance of the hall and looked at each other, but did not say anything. After saying goodbye to each other, the two left the towering Sky Hall and returned to their respective residences. For the whole day, the towering Sky sect was very lively and noisy. Countless disciples were talking about Tianzi and the double-headed golden dragon. Countless disciples witnessed the scene of the double-headed golden dragon descending from the sky and were shocked. Some people also saw Tianzi's appearance and aura. They said that he was so handsome that he did not look like a mortal. His temperament was as noble as a god, and they worshipped him. Some people also heard that Tianzi lived in the Sky River Palace on the red firmament peak. If it were not for the fear of offending Tianzi, many disciples would have run outside the Sky River Palace to watch. For the whole day, Tianzi and the imperial general stayed in the Sky River Palace and did not appear again. After Tianzi rested for half a day, he asked the imperial general to find countless books and information. He quietly read the information and quickly understood the situation in the Tianshan region and the details of the 8 major sections. The people of the Heart Moon sect, Thousand Autumns sect, Six Unity sect, and other major sects stayed in their respective courtyards. The people of the various sects waited patiently for news and for Tianzi to summon them. Without the Son of Heaven's order, they didn't dare to leave the Sky Pillar sect. The day passed quickly. At night, the Sky Pillar sect was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. A grand banquet was held in the sky-raising palace to welcome the Son of Heaven who had come from afar. All the sect leaders, elders, and chief disciples were fortunate enough to attend the banquet. During the banquet, the Tianjian sect master Gao Yi changed from his miserable and distressed appearance during the day to repeatedly toast the emperor. He flattered the Son of Heaven without leaving a trace, praising the Son of Heaven as a peerless hero that was rarely seen in the world. Of course, with the Son of Heaven's status, power, and talent, he could indeed be called the #1 genius of the human race. Even in the entire Tianshan land, Tianzi was one of the top few absolute geniuses. He was the true pride of the heavens. Chu Tiansheng and the other sect leaders were full of disdain for Gao Yi's actions. At the same time, on a mountain peak 25 kilometers east of the Sky Pillar sect, the bright moonlight shone on the mountain peak, covering it with a layer of hazy moonlight. On a giant rock on the mountain peak, a man and a woman were standing. They were looking at the Sky Pillar sect with cold eyes. The woman was about 2 meters tall. She wore a long black robe, a cloak, and a veil. Only a pair of dark red eyes could be seen. She was the Blood Moon Infanta. The middle-aged man standing next to her was also a demon. His body was frighteningly tall. He was more than 3 meters tall and had dark purple skin all over his body. This giant had a head full of long red hair, and his entire body was covered with thick purple hair. He was not wearing any clothes and only had a black python apron wrapped around his waist. He was the Blood Moon Infanta's father, the leader of the Blood Demon tribe, the Blood Demon King. The father and daughter stood side by side and looked at the brightly lit Sky Pillar sect from afar. Cold, murderous intentions surged in their eyes. Human worms of the Sky Pillar sect, it won't be long before this king turns all of you into ashes. The Blood Demon King drew back his lips and cursed with a cold tone. The Blood Moon Infanta nodded and asked in a deep voice, "Father, you have already studied the Sky Pillar sect's 9-dragon spirit vein map yesterday. Do you have any plans?" The Blood Demon King said in a cold tone, "Although I already know the 9-dragon spirit vein map like the back of my hand, the experts of various sects have gathered in the Sky Pillar sect. We can only continue to endure and cannot act rashly. I brought a soul crystal from the palace. This crystal was once one of the treasures of a certain sect in the Yong and region. After I destroyed that sect, I kept this soul crystal until today. Now it can finally be put to use." As he spoke, the Blood Demon King spread out his wide left hand. A silver crystal the size of an egg appeared in his palm. It flickered with a bright silver light. The Blood Moon Infanta stared at the soul crystal and said with a face full of curiosity, "Father, the High Priest also mentioned the soul crystal and asked the Tianjin sect master to find a way to get one. It's a pity that the Tianjin sect master's disciple, Shi Wenyu, is too useless." Not only did he not get the soul crystal, but he was also heavily injured by Ji Tianqing and was on the verge of death. "Father, what are you going to do with this soul crystal?" The Blood Demon King drew back his lips and revealed a row of white fangs. He sneered and said, "Of course, I'm going to destroy the 9-dragon spirit vein in preparation for the birth of the Demon King. The soul crystal is the source of power for the Tianyuan array. It can also devour the power of the Tianyuan array and silently destroy the spirit vein array. Blood Moon, I'm going to sneak into the 9-dragon spirit vein array and use a secret technique to bury this soul crystal. The soul crystal will quietly devour the power of the 9-dragon spirit vein array and gradually destroy the structure of the spirit vein. After a month at most, the power of the 9-dragon spirit vein array will be so weak that it can no longer be maintained." The Blood Demon King sneered as he spoke of his plan. The Blood Moon Infanta nodded and praised, "Good. Father, you're going to sneak into the Sky Pillar sect alone. There are many Sky Prime experts in the Sky Pillar sect, so you must be careful." The Blood Demon King sneered in disdain. "There are only a few experts in the Sky Pillar sect that can match me. I also have the smoky umbrella, so how can I be discovered by them? What danger can there be? Blood Moon, you stay here and wait. I'll be back soon." After he finished speaking, he turned into a black mist and left the mountain peak, flying in the direction of the Sky Pillar sect. The Blood Moon Infanta stayed on the mountain peak and silently waited as she watched the black mist disappear into the night sky. After half an hour, the Blood Demon King arrived at the side of the Sky Pillar sect and arrived at the foot of the Jade Sword Peak. The invisible 9-dragon spirit vein array protected the entire Sky Pillar sect and also enveloped the Jade Sword Peak. The Blood Demon King took out the smoky umbrella and borrowed its power to quickly pass through the sect-protecting array. Chapter 380. The Blood Demon King was a Sky Origin Realm expert, and with the smoky umbrella in his hand, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. He shuttled through the pitch-black underground without making any sound or emitting any demonic power fluctuations. Unless a Sky Origin Realm expert approached him, no one would be able to detect his aura. Although there were many Sky Origin Realm experts in the Sky-bearing sect, they were all attending the banquet in the Sky-bearing palace. No one would have thought that someone would take the opportunity to invade. 15 minutes later, the Blood Demon King dived into the depths of the underground and quietly used a demonic secret technique to place the Spirit Soul Crystal in the Spirit Vein Array. The Spirit Soul Crystal was hidden very well and had fused with the array's aura. It was impossible for anyone to discover it. After doing all this, the Blood Demon King sneered and silently left the underground. 30 minutes later, he returned to the mountain peak 50 miles away from the Sky-bearing sect and appeared beside the Blood Moon Infanta. Seeing that he had returned safely, the Blood Moon Infanta hurriedly asked, "Father, did the plan go smoothly?" "Of course it went smoothly." The Blood Demon King sneered confidently. "I have already placed the Spirit Soul Crystal in the depths of the Spirit Vein Array. After 1 month, the power of the Spirit Vein Array will be exhausted. At that time, even if the people of the Sky-bearing sect discover the abnormality, it will be too late to remedy it. We can take the opportunity to destroy the seal and rescue the Demon King. The Blood Moon Infanta's blood boiled, and she clenched her fists in excitement. Great! Father, we will succeed soon. Yes. The Blood Demon King nodded and said, however, it is still too early to be happy. I still need to make more preparations. He warned the Blood Moon Infanta in a low voice, Blood Moon, for the next few days, stay nearby and secretly pay attention to the Sky-Bearing Sect's movements. If there is any news from the Sky-Bearing Sect, you must immediately send a message to me. In addition, you must also pay attention to hiding. Don't be discovered by the people of the Sky-Bearing Sect. I understand. The Blood Moon Infanta nodded solemnly and asked in confusion, Father, what are you going to do? Aren't you coming with me? The Blood Demon King grinned and said in a playful tone, I haven't been to the ancient star realm for many years. Since I've returned, I must ensure that the plan goes smoothly. This king has an old friend in the ancient realm. It's time to go see her. Hearing this, Blood Moon Infanta vaguely understood something. She nodded and didn't ask any more questions. After that, the Blood Demon King left the smoky net umbrella to her, turned into a black mist, and flew away. She remained alone at the peak of the mountain, sitting on a millstone and silently watching the bright lights of the Sky Pillar Sect. The noisy and bustling night with undercurrents finally came to an end. The next morning, when the sun had just risen, there was still a faint layer of morning mist between the peaks of the Sky-Bearing Sect. The Jade Ripple Lake behind the heaven-upholding peak was also shrouded in a thin layer of mist, making it even more beautiful and mysterious than before. The clear water rippled in the lake, and the willow trees swayed gently on the shore. Not far away from the Spirit Herb Garden, there were still waves of fragrance from the plants. The scenery by the lake was really fresh and elegant. At this time, a young man and woman were taking a stroll on the bluestone path under the willow trees by the lake. The man was tall and handsome. He wore a brocade robe and a pair of gold-rimmed firewalking boots. His long hair was tied up with a jade crown, making him look like an immortal. There was no doubt that he was the son of heaven, Long Yunxiao. The woman beside him was wearing a long white dress. She had an extremely beautiful appearance and a cold temperament. She was Yunyao. Yesterday, Long Yunxiao had arrived at the Sky-Bearing Sect for the first time. He had to accept the visits of the various sect masters, so he naturally had to dress up. He wore a golden robe and a crown. Today, he didn't plan to deal with sect matters. It was his private time, so he changed into casual clothes. Even so, he was still extraordinarily handsome, and his temperament was noble and graceful. The two strolled along the path by the lake. Although they were walking side by side, they maintained a distance of 2 steps between each other. This distance was just right. It didn't appear to be close, but it wasn't too distant either. It was a normal distance between ordinary friends. Long Yunxiao seemed to be in a good mood. He smiled and said in a gentle tone, Yao Yao, I remember the first time I saw you was 9 years ago. That was at Uncle Yun's 100th birthday banquet. That night, you were wearing the Water Moon Frozen Star dress. Although you were still young, you were already a little beauty who suppressed the entire audience and stunned all the guests. I didn't expect that 9 years would pass in the blink of an eye. You've become a peerless beauty and the #1 genius of the Tianqian region. Time really flies. As Long Yunxiao spoke, his eyes revealed a look of reminiscence. A smile also appeared on his handsome face. Yunyao was still as calm as usual. Her temperament was cold, and she didn't have much of a reaction. Son of heaven, you disturbed my sleep early in the morning and asked me to take a stroll by the lake. Are you trying to help me remember the past? There's no need to mention those things of the past. You should just get to the point. Long Yunxiao wasn't angry. Instead, a playful smile appeared on his face. Yao Yao, I didn't expect that after staying in the Tianqian region for a few years, your personality would change a little. You're not as cold as before. He knew very well that Yunyao's personality was even colder in the past. She wouldn't say so much to him. Yunyao frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. Long Yunxiao continued, Yao Yao, I know that the reason why you left the Cloud Spirit Palace, left the Central State, and came to this remote Tianqian region was to avoid me. But now, the Emperor and Mother are going to choose a concubine for me. They've chosen the 3 most outstanding candidates from the 9 regions. Coincidentally, you're one of them. Yao Yao, don't you think that this is fate and our destiny? Even if you ran to this remote Tianqian region to avoid me, You still have to reunite with me in the end." After saying that, he looked at Yun Yao with a gentle gaze. His face was full of tenderness. Yun Yao glanced at him and said indifferently, "You should know that I don't believe in fate. I only believe that man can conquer the heavens. Of course, my fate is in my control. Also, I heard that the other two heavenly concubine candidates aren't bad either. In terms of looks, they're alluring beauties. In terms of talent, they're top geniuses. Why don't you consider them?" A smile flashed across Long Yunxiao's eyes. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Yao Yao, can I interpret your words as jealousy?" Yun Yao looked at him indifferently and said coldly, "You're thinking too much." Long Yunxiao said to himself, "Yao Yao, you should know that from the first time I saw you, I've decided that you'll be my heavenly concubine. With such a beautiful woman like you, how could other women enter my eyes? Compared to you, they're all ordinary women. I know that you don't want to be my heavenly concubine, but it doesn't matter. I won't force you to do something you don't want to." Chapter 381. Yun Yao wasn't surprised by Long Yunxiao's attitude. Long Yunxiao had said this a few years ago, and it hadn't changed until now. She couldn't help but frown. She said calmly, "Son of Heaven, you know that it's impossible. Why are you wasting time on me?" Long Yunxiao's voice was still gentle. "With our talent and strength, we don't lack time. We can live for 300 to 500 years. I will always wait for you." Yun Yao glanced at him and didn't say anything else. Both of them were very firm. It was impossible to change each other's minds with just a few words. Since that was the case, Yun Yao didn't want to continue talking about this with him. She remained silent and strolled along the bluestone path by the lake. Her eyes were fixed on the misty lake. Long Yunxiao walked beside her and talked about some interesting past events. His eyes and tone were very gentle from beginning to end. No matter what Yun Yao's reaction was or what her attitude was, he was always gentle and gentlemanly. This had been the case for many years, and it hadn't changed even now. 15 minutes passed quickly. At this moment, a young man in a white robe walked over from the bluestone path in front of them. The young man in the white robe was also strolling by the lake. The two of them met unexpectedly. When Yun Yao saw the young man in the white robe walking over, her cold expression and eyes softened a lot. She greeted him. "Junior brother Tianxing, good morning." Without a doubt, the young man in the white robe walking over was Ji Tianxing. After the banquet last night, he didn't sleep at all. He had been meditating and cultivating. When dawn came, he casually walked around the towering sky peak. Unknowingly, he arrived at the Jade Wave Lake at the back of the mountain. He did not expect to meet Yun Yao and Long Yunxiao, who was beside her here. Ji Tianxing was stunned for a moment. Then, he calmly walked in front of the two of them and greeted them with cupped fists. "Greetings, Your Majesty. Eldest senior sister. The two of you sure are in a good mood. Are you here to admire the scenery of Jade Wave Lake so early in the morning?" He calmly looked at Yun Yao and Long Yunxiao and chatted with them. His mood didn't change at all. Long Yunxiao looked at him and smiled. He nodded in return. However, Long Yunxiao was not familiar with him. He only knew that he was Chu Tianxing's personal disciple, so he did not speak to him. However, Yun Yao walked to Ji Tianxing's side and stood face to face with him. She said in a gentle tone, "Junior brother Tianxing, Tianzi and I have known each other since we were young. This time, he was ordered to come to the Heavenly Star region to take charge of the situation. He also came to visit me on the way, so he invited me to take a walk by the lake early in the morning," Yun Yao explained briefly. Although her expression was normal, Ji Tianxing felt that something was amiss when he heard it. He thought to himself, "So big senior sister and Tianzi have known each other since they were young. In that case, my previous guess was not wrong. Eldest senior sister's background is indeed not simple. Eldest senior sister is explaining to me in person. Are you afraid that I will misunderstand something?" He already had a sense of propriety in his heart, so he said to Yun Yao and Long Yunxiao, "I didn't expect eldest senior sister and Tianzi to be friends. Since old friends have met, of course I should visit and greet them." Long Yunxiao only cared about Yun Yao. Why would he care about what Ji Tianxing said or did? At this time, Yun Yao cupped her hands and bowed to Tianxing. She said apologetically, "Tianzi, I'm sorry. I made an appointment with junior brother Tianxing to go to the Creek Mountain Flower Valley today. Please forgive Yun Yao for not being able to accompany you. Goodbye." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing and Long Yunxiao were stunned. Ji Tianqing's expression didn't change, but he was secretly puzzled. Strange, when did I have an appointment with eldest senior sister? Why are we going to the Creek Mountain Flower Valley? However, he was quick-witted and immediately guessed Yun Yao's intention. Could it be that eldest senior sister deliberately said this to use this as an excuse to get rid of Tianzi? Thinking of this, he also cupped his hands and bowed to Long Yunxiao. He revealed an apologetic smile and said, "Your Majesty, please excuse me." Long Yunxiao frowned slightly. He glanced at Ji Tianqing and then looked at Yun Yao. He vaguely guessed something in his heart. He secretly pondered in his heart, but his expression didn't change at all. He smiled and said, "Yao Yao, I came all the way to the Tianshan region to meet you. I just chatted with you for a while, and you want to leave me here. Aren't you treating me as a friend? It just so happens that I also want to see the scenery of the Tianshan region. Yao Yao, shouldn't you be a good host and take me to see it?" Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao didn't expect Long Yunxiao to be so persistent and insist on going with them. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely be embarrassed to disturb their date and would have left long ago. However, Long Yunxiao was an honored guest, and they were disciples of the Sky Pillar sect. They should be warmly received. Moreover, Long Yunxiao's words were neither light nor heavy. He was jokingly reprimanding Yun Yao, making it impossible for Yun Yao to refuse. Helpless, she could only say calmly, "Since Tianzi also wants to see the scenery, as disciples of the Sky Pillar sect, we naturally have to entertain you. Tianzi, please." Then, Yun Yao, Ji Tianqing, and Long Yunxiao left the Jade Lake together and walked towards the Creek Mountain in the depths of the Sky Pillar sect. The Creek Mountain was one of the 9 peaks of the Sky Pillar sect. It was located in the deepest part of the mountain range, and the scenery was very beautiful. There was a valley in the Creek Mountain that was filled with 5-colored spirit flowers. The flowers didn't wither all year round, and the scenery was beautiful and pleasant. Ever since Ji Tianqing entered the Sky Pillar sect, he had been busy cultivating and increasing his strength and had never been to the Creek Mountain. After the 3 of them left the Sky Pillar peak, they quickly walked through the forest between the peaks and went straight to the Creek Mountain's Flower Valley. Yun Yao had a cold personality, and Ji Tianqing had an introverted personality. The 2 of them weren't good at talking and socializing. Long Yunxiao was eloquent, but he hid his thoughts and didn't chat with Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing on the way. He silently observed Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. From some clues, he could see that Yun Yao's attitude towards Ji Tianqing was both trusting and close. The 2 of them walked side by side and were only half a foot apart. They didn't feel strange at all. In Long Yunxiao's eyes, this distance made them seem as intimate as a couple, making him feel a little gloomy. However, Long Yunxiao understood Yun Yao's temperament very well. He had known Yun Yao for many years, but when had he ever seen Yun Yao take the initiative to get close to someone? With Yun Yao's taste, how could she fall for such an ordinary person? She's only doing this to deliberately avoid me. Thinking of this, Long Yunxiao felt a lot more relieved. After an hour, the 3 of them were about to reach the foot of the Creek Mountain. At this time, Long Yunxiao's spiritual sense inadvertently discovered that there was a white-browed old man in a yellow robe who seemed to have been following them 100 meters behind them. The white-browed old man was short and fat with a goatee on his chin. His strength had also reached the peak of the Origin Core stage. Chapter 382. Not long after, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Long Yunxiao climbed up Shi Mountain. This was a mountain peak that was more than 3,000 meters tall. There was a huge rain-making spiritual formation on the mountain peak. The formation kept condensing thick clouds, and drizzling rain continued to fall, converging into a clear lake on the mountain peak. The lake water flowed down from the mountain peak, forming several streams on the hillside, and flowed to the valley halfway up the mountain. The valley was full of 5-colored spiritual flowers, which emitted a fragrant fragrance, attracting many bees and butterflies to wander among the flowers. A few streams flowed down from the mountain peak and passed through the flower valley, adding a bit of poetry to the flower valley. The name Shi Mountain was also derived from this. Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Long Yunxiao strolled in the flower valley, admiring the spiritual flowers and mountains. Their moods became much more relaxed and happy. Long Yunxiao could see that Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing were close, and there seemed to be signs of affection. However, he didn't take Ji Tianqing seriously, nor did he show the slightest dissatisfaction. He acted as if he didn't notice it at all. As usual, he chatted with Yun Yao and reminisced about the past. His words and actions were full of the majesty and bearing of an emperor. However, Yun Yao didn't have much interest in the topics he talked about. She had been silent the whole time. She was only closer to Ji Tianqing. Occasionally, she would chat with Ji Tianqing. Her tone and expression were also very gentle. In a bush at the edge of the flower valley, an old man in a yellow robe was hiding in the bushes, observing the movements of Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao from afar. This person had a short stature and a big belly, but he had to act like an immortal. Without a doubt, he was the trusted aide of the Tianjin sect's sect master, Gao Yi, guest elder Huangfu. At this time, guest elder Huangfu was curled up in the bushes, peeping at Ji Tianqing and the others from afar. There was a playful sneer in his eyes. Hee, the sect master asked me to secretly move around the Sky Pillar sect and see if I can find any clues. I didn't expect that I would find such shocking news today. The Honorable Emperor not only knows Yun Yao, but he also has deep feelings for Yun Yao. Unfortunately, Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing secretly have feelings for each other. They seem to be close. Oof, how interesting. Guest Elder Huangfu sneered in his heart. After peeping for a while, he quietly turned around and left. After leaving Creek Mountain, he hurriedly rushed back to Heaven Pillar Peak and entered a courtyard house with a cold environment. This residence was called the Guest Courtyard. It was a residence that the Sky Pillar sect used to receive guests. The Sky Pillar sect had arranged for the Heavenly Sword sect's sect master Gao Yi and guest elder Huangfu to stay in this courtyard. After entering the courtyard, guest elder Huangfu carefully observed his surroundings and made sure that nobody was following him before he quietly entered the secret chamber. The secret room was dimly lit and empty. Apart from the 2 jade futons, there was nothing else in the room. Gao Yi was sitting cross-legged on a futon, meditating and cultivating with his eyes closed. After guest elder Huangfu entered the secret chamber, he quickly closed the stone door and cast a soundproofing array formation. Gao Yi was awakened by him and opened his eyes. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Guest elder Huangfu, you seem to be in a hurry. What happened?" Guest elder Huangfu cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Sect master, you asked this subordinate to secretly move around in the Sky Pillar sect." This subordinate obeyed and quietly watched Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Just now, this subordinate discovered a rather shocking matter. This is definitely the best news for us. Hearing this, Gao Yi's interest was immediately piqued. His eyes lit up. "Tell me, what is the good news?" Guest elder Huangfu lowered his voice and reported truthfully. Just now, this subordinate saw Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Tianzi. The 3 of them were actually together and even went to the Creek Mountain Flower Valley to enjoy the scenery. This subordinate followed them all the way to the Creek Mountain Flower Valley. After observing for a long time, I found out that Tianzi and Yun Yao had known each other for a long time. Moreover, Tianzi is very devoted to Yun Yao. However, Yun Yao's attitude towards Tianzi seems to be a little cold, but she is closer to Ji Tianqing. Hearing this, Gao Yi raised his eyebrows and a smile appeared on his face. He said in a low voice, "Hee, I really didn't expect Yun Yao to have such good fortune. Since Tianzi and Yun Yao know each other and have deep feelings for each other, he will definitely choose Yun Yao as his heavenly consort. This is a great thing for the Tianjin region. In the future, the Tianjin region will be taken care of by the imperial court and will definitely become the most powerful region. We will also be able to obtain great benefits from this. However, that little bastard Ji Tianqing is too much of a hindrance. He is sandwiched in the middle to prevent Yun Yao and Tianzi from contacting each other. I'm afraid he will ruin this matter. Guest elder Huangfu, we have to think of a way to restrain Ji Tianqing and make him keep a distance from Yun Yao. This way, Tianzi will have a chance to get close to Yun Yao." Guest elder Huangfu frowned and thought for a moment. However, he shook his head and said, "Sect master, this subordinate feels that this matter is inappropriate. If Yun Yao becomes the heavenly consort, it will do us more harm than good. After all, Yun Yao is the chief disciple of the Sky Pillar sect. If she really becomes the heavenly consort, the Sky Pillar sect will have a backer and will definitely be taken care of by the imperial court. At that time, the Sky Pillar sect will be like a tiger that has grown wings, and its power will be even stronger. Not only will we not be able to deal with the Sky Pillar sect, but we will definitely be suppressed by them even more miserably. Gao Yi's brows immediately knitted together, and a gloomy cold light flashed in his eyes. After thinking for a moment, he nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. If Yunyao really becomes the heavenly consort, it will definitely destroy our plan and make the Sky Pillar sect even more powerful. We can't provoke them." Guest Elder Huangfu frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "Sect Master, this subordinate feels that we might as well put the matter of the heavenly consort aside and ignore it. At present, what we should consider more is how to use external forces to deal with the Sky Pillar sect. This subordinate believes that Tianzi's position is high and noble, and he is the most powerful external force. If we can cause conflict between the Sky Pillar sect and Tianzi, and make Tianzi dissatisfied with the Sky Pillar sect, then the Sky Pillar sect will be in danger. This is the best situation for us. Make Tianzi dissatisfied with the Sky Pillar sect." Gao Yi revealed a puzzled expression and asked, "Guest Elder Huangfu, what do you think?" Guest Elder Huangfu already had an idea. He revealed an unfathomable smile and said, "The person Tianzi cares about is Yun Yao, and Yun Yao's attitude towards him is cold, but she is close to Ji Tianqing. Since that's the case, then we can do the opposite and prevent Yun Yao from becoming the heavenly consort." At this point, Gao Yi suddenly came to a realization, and a cold smile appeared on his face. This king understands. Since Tianzi cares about Yun Yao, then we will think of a way to matchmake Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao together and let Ji Tianqing get Yun Yao. If Tianzi's heavenly consort is snatched away, he will definitely hate Ji Tianqing to the bone and vent his anger on the Sky Pillar sect. Chapter 383. Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Long Yunshao played in the valley for half a day before leaving. After leaving the valley, the three of them went to several other mountain peaks to enjoy the scenery of the Sky Pillar sect. During this period, Yun Yao deliberately ignored Long Yunshao and walked side by side with Ji Tianqing. Their conversation and behavior were relatively close. Even those who didn't know could see that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were a couple, and Long Yunshao was the awkward third party. However, Long Yunshao didn't feel awkward at all. His expression was normal from beginning to end, and he even praised the scenery of the Sky Pillar sect. After the sun set, the three of them ended their tour and returned to their respective residences to rest. After Yun Yao returned to the White Cloud Hall, she sat cross-legged on the bed and meditated. In the past few days, the emperor and the sect leaders of the various sects were in the Sky Pillar sect. As the chief disciple, she had to appear every day to deal with some matters. Therefore, she couldn't enter the secret room to cultivate in seclusion. She could only meditate and cultivate. Unknowingly, 4 hours passed and it was late at night. The entire Scarlet Firmament Peak was quiet and shrouded in the hazy moonlight, looking quiet and serene. Yun Yao ended her cultivation and opened her eyes. Today is the middle of the month. It's time to go to the Spirit Moon Hot Spring to cultivate. She muttered in a low voice, got up, left the room, and walked towards the backyard of the White Cloud Hall. There was a 10-meter square stone room in the backyard. It was set up with a special mysterious array and built into the Spirit Moon Hot Spring. This stone room was connected to Yun Yao's bedroom and the secret room for cultivation. It only had 3 walls. There was no wall in front of it, nor was there a door. There was only a carved jade screen that separated the hot spring from the passage. Yun Yao walked behind the screen and took off her phoenix-patterned boots, revealing a pair of fair and sparkling jade feet. Then, she walked towards the hot spring. This hot spring was 10 meters square. The water in the hot spring was boiling and contained a rich silver-white brilliance. Dense spiritual energy rose from it. There were many moon-white gems embedded at the bottom and the edges of the pool. They emitted a sparkling white light and illuminated the hot spring. This Spirit Moon Hot Spring was specially set up by Yun Yao and expended a lot of materials to create it. She had the bloodline of the heavenly spirit sacred body, so her physique was different from ordinary people. Her cultivation attribute was also somewhat special. Ever since she was 6 years old, she would soak in the Spirit Moon Hot Spring for a night every month. While cleansing her body and mind, she also had to cultivate and strengthen her bloodline power. When she was in Cloud Spirit Palace, Madame Yun had specially built a Spirit Moon Sky Spring for her. The heavenly spring was located in the clouds of the 9 heavens. It had an incomparably miraculous effect and was also very secretive. After she came to the sky-bearing sect, she naturally didn't have the same good conditions as in Cloud Spirit Palace. She could only build a spirit moon hot spring in the backyard. Yun Yao walked to the edge of the hot spring and waved her hand to release a beam of true essence, activating the array formation of the hot spring. Suddenly, the bottom of the hot spring lit up with specks of moonlight, making the entire hot spring hazy and overflowing with spiritual energy. She reached out and removed the jade belt from her waist. Then, she took off her white dress and stored both the dress and the jade belt into her spatial ring. What a perfect, flawless, and peerless beauty. Her tall and slender figure, her white jade-like skin, her proud curves, and her alluring face. Every one of them was intoxicating and infatuating. Yun Yao took out a white sand belt from her spatial ring and wrapped it around her slender waist, covering her white underwear and perky curves. Under the hazy moonlight, her straight and slender legs were as smooth and flawless as white jade, like the most perfect piece of art. She only wore a moon-white doo-doo on her upper body that wrapped around her undulating chest and her flat and white belly. She raised her arm to tidy her hair and bun before stepping into the hot spring. Ripples appeared on the surface of the hot spring, reflecting the hazy light. It made the hot spring feel like a dream and intoxicating. Yun Yao walked into the hot spring and sat down cross-legged. The warm moon-white water immediately submerged her flawless body up to her shoulders. She formed a seal with both hands and placed them flat on her smooth and delicate knees. Then she closed her eyes and began to cultivate. The hot spring was silent. Rich and gentle spiritual energy kept flowing into her body, cleansing her body and strengthening her bloodline. At the same time, Ji Tianqing was cultivating in his room to consolidate his martial arts foundation. Suddenly, a black figure flashed across the night sky and silently landed in the courtyard. It was a short and fat man in black. He had profound skills and was very agile. The man in black used his spiritual sense to investigate and immediately found Ji Tianqing in the room. He waved his hand and shot out 2 cold lights, which shot toward Ji Tianqing as fast as shooting stars. Swish! Swish! The 2 cold lights pierced through the night sky and instantly pierced through the wooden window, shooting toward Ji Tianqing's head. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing was suddenly awakened and subconsciously tilted his head. The 2 cold lights suddenly brushed past him and nailed to the wall with 2 clanking sounds, splashing sparks. Ji Tianqing turned his head and saw that it was 2 hidden weapons, the morning soul nails. Someone is ambushing me. His face suddenly turned gloomy and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He leaped towards the window and smashed the wooden window with a bang before rushing into the courtyard. The man in black saw him appear and turned around to escape without hesitation. His figure flashed and jumped over the courtyard wall and out of the courtyard. Ji Tianqing also jumped over the courtyard wall without hesitation and chased after the man in black. Oof! Now that the emperor and the sect masters are living in our sect, I want to see who is so bold to launch a sneak attack at this time. He snorted coldly in his heart, and his eyes surged with a biting cold murderous intent. He used his shadowless steps with all his strength and followed the man in black. He passed through the dark night and ran down the mountain. No matter what, he had to catch that black-clothed man and see who had the guts to do such a thing. A quarter of an hour passed quickly. Ji Tianqing chased with all his strength, but he could not catch up with the man in black. He was dozens of meters away from him. At this time, he realized that he had chased the man in black up the red cloud peak and arrived outside the white cloud hall. Swoosh! The man in black flashed and jumped into the white cloud hall. Ji Tianqing was stunned and thought to himself, White Cloud Hall. Isn't this the residence of Senior Sister? It's late at night now. Would it be rude for me to rush in like this? However, he thought about it again. The man in black's identity was unknown. He came with ill intentions and was very powerful. If the man in black sneaked into the White Cloud Hall to assassinate Yun Yao would be in danger. Moreover, the Tianjin sect had plotted to kill him and Yun Yao. He could not help but suspect that the man in black might be related to the Tianjin sect. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated and jumped into the White Cloud Hall. He moved quickly in the night to search for the man in black. After 100 seconds, Ji Tianqing searched the White Cloud Hall, but did not find the man in black. He did not find any clues. His expression became more serious, and he became more worried. He ran through Yun Yao's bedroom and went to the backyard. In the entire White Cloud Hall, only the backyard was not searched. He passed through the dark passage and saw a white jade screen at the end of the passage. Behind the screen was a stone room, which was faintly lit. He did not think much and rushed over as fast as the wind. However, when he went around the white jade screen and saw the scene in front of him, he was stunned. He never expected that the stone room behind the screen was a hot spring with abundant spiritual chi and hazy moonlight. In the hot spring, there was a long-haired beauty with a beautiful face and flawless skin. It was Yun Yao. She was cultivating with her eyes closed. Her chest and fair shoulders were above the water's surface. She was not wearing a long skirt. She was only wearing a doo-doo and a tulle. Brothers, where are the recommendation tickets? You're tuning in to the Blee Maze Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.